still think about that night whenever my phone buzzes late, but the sound alone is enough to drag me back there. It started normal, maybe too normal, which is probably why it messed with me so hard. I had been swiping out of boredom, laying on my bed with the lights off, just scrolling until my thumb hurt. Her profile felt real in a way most didn't. Bad selfies, weird captions, a smile that looked like it happened by accident. She didn't look like she was trying to sell anything. Just looked like someone who lived alone and forgot to clean their mirror. We matched fast. The messages were easy. Not clever, not rehearsed. Just dumb jokes and random thoughts. She talked about the neighborhood she lived in, this old part of town with narrow streets and houses stacked too close together. She said her roommate was gone for the weekend and invited me over to watch movies and order food. Nothing wild. Just hanging out. That actually made me trust it more. I told a friend where I was going, grabbed my jacket, and headed out. The place was farther than I thought. The bus ride felt endless, cutting through parts of the city I never had a reason to go to. Closed stores, flickering streetlights, houses that all looked like they had stories they didn't want told. When I got off, my phone said I was there, but the street looked wrong. Quiet and a heavy way. No cars passing. No music. Just a hum of power lines and the sound of my own steps. Her house was a narrow two-story with peeling paint and a porch that leaned slightly to the left. One light was on inside. She opened the door before I even knocked, like she had been standing there waiting. In person she looked the same but different, like the pictures didn't quite capture how tired her eyes were. She smiled anyway and waved me in. Inside smelled like old food and air freshener fighting each other. The living room was small, couch pushed against one wall, tea balanced on a stand that looked ready to collapse. She apologized for the mess even though it wasn't that bad. Said her roommate was always the clean one. That stuck with me later. We sat down and scrolled through movies. She kept her phone face down on the table. Every time it buzzed, she flipped it over without checking it, like she didn't want to see who it was. I didn't think much of it. People have stuff going on. The movie played, but neither of us paid attention. She talked about work, about wanting to move, about how she felt stuck. I talked about school and how I hated early mornings. It felt easy, almost boring in a good way. About an hour in, there was a sound at the front door. Keys. Not someone knocking, not a neighbor. Keys turning like they belonged there. She froze. Not in a dramatic way, just stiff, like her body stopped listening to her brain. She laughed after a second and said it must be her roommate coming back early. The laugh didn't match her face. It was too fast, too loud. The door opened. Footsteps moved through the hallway. Heavy steps, slow and deliberate. Whoever it was didn't announce themselves. I sat there, trying to be polite, trying not to overthink it. Then he appeared in the doorway. He was older than I expected. Not old, but older enough that the word roommate didn't fit anymore. Broad shoulders, tired eyes, wearing a jacket like he had just come from somewhere important. He looked at me like he already knew exactly who I was. Not curious. Not surprised. More like confirming something. The air changed. It felt thicker, harder to breathe. She stood up too fast and started saying things that didn't land right, like excuses thrown at a wall. He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on me. I noticed his hand was tight around his phone. He walked into the room and sat down across from me, close enough that I could smell cold air and something metallic. He didn't ask who I was. Didn't ask why I was there. He already knew. I realized that before he even took his phone out. He unlocked it and turned the screen toward me. My stomach dropped. There was my profile picture, my name, screenshots of messages, jokes I thought were private, stuff taken out of context and stacked together like evidence. I could see the timestamps. Some of them were from weeks ago. She had been sending him everything. He scrolled slowly, like he wanted me to see all of it. His face didn't change. It was calm in a way that scared me more than yelling ever could. I understood then. This was her roommate. This was her husband. The way he sat there, the way the house seemed to bend around him, like he owned every inch of it. My heart was slamming so hard I thought he could hear it. I tried to stand up, but my legs didn't feel real. She was pacing behind me, hands in her hair, breathing fast. He finally looked at her then, and the look wasn't angry. It was disappointed, like this had happened before. He turned back to me and nodded slow, like he was checking off a box. He knew my name. He knew where I went to school. He knew things I never told her directly, stuff you only get from reading between messages. He had done his homework. The room felt smaller. The tab kept playing, characters laughing at something that wasn't funny. The normal sound of it made everything worse. I couldn't tell if this was about to turn into something violent or if he just wanted me scared. Both felt bad. He stood up and walked toward the front door, and stopped and looked back at me. He gestured toward the door, slow and clear. Not rushing me, not threatening. Just telling me without words that I needed to go. I didn't argue. I grabbed my jacket with shaking hands and moved past him. As I stepped outside, the cold hit me hard. I didn't realize how warm it had been inside until that moment. My head felt light. I walked down the porch steps too fast and almost tripped. Behind me, the door closed softly. No slam. That somehow made it worse. I didn't run. I wanted to, but my legs wouldn't do it. I walked down the street, counting steps, trying to keep my breathing steady. Every sound made me flinch. A car door somewhere far away. A dog barking. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I almost threw it. I didn't look back until I reached the corner. The house looked the same as before. Quiet. Dark. Like nothing had happened. I stood there for a second, just staring, trying to convince myself it was over. On the bus ride home, I kept replaying everything. The way she said roommate. The way her phone stayed face down. The screenshots. I realized he had probably been watching this play out from the start, letting it happen, collecting proof, waiting for the moment that would scare both of us the most. When I got home, I didn't sleep. I sat in my bed with the lights on until morning, phone turned off, heart still racing every time a car passed outside. I deleted the app that day. Not because I thought every match would end like that, but because I couldn't stand the idea of someone knowing my name before I ever met them again. The weird part is I almost didn't go, not because I had a bad feeling, but because everything felt too controlled, like it was planned down to the minute. My phone buzzed while I was half awake, screen lighting up my room, and there was his message again reminding me where to meet. Same spot, same time, right by the police station. He said it was for safety, which sounded responsible, almost comforting, but it also felt like someone saying don't worry too much, which usually means you should. We matched late one night when I couldn't sleep. His profile was clean in a boring way. No wild photos, no dramatic captions. Just gym mirror pics, a dog, and a bio that said he liked coffee and long walks. I remember thinking he looked older than me, but not in a creepy way. More like stable. The kind of guy who knew how to schedule dentist appointments. Our messages were fine. Not exciting, not awkward. Just steady. He asked a lot of questions, but nothing too deep. I didn't think much of it. When he suggested meeting, he was weirdly specific. Not just a place, but an exact corner near the station, under a broken streetlight. He said there were cameras everywhere and cops always around, so it was the safest first date spot possible. I told a friend where I was going and headed out, trying to ignore the part of my brain that kept poking holes in it. The station sat between a busy road and a strip of fast food places. The air smelled like grease and exhaust. Police cars lined the lot, lights off but engines humming. I got there early and stood by the corner he mentioned, pretending to scroll while watching everyone who passed. I kept thinking how strange it was to feel nervous in a place that was supposed to feel safe. He showed up right on time. Not late, not early. Exactly on time. He smiled like we had known each other longer than we had. His voice was calm, measured. Everything about him felt controlled, from the way he stood to the way he checked his watch. We walked toward a small cafe across the street, still close enough to see the station behind us. We sat outside because he said it was better to stay visible. That word stuck with me. Visible. Like being seen mattered more than being comfortable. Cars passed. Officers walked in and out of the building. The normalcy of it all made me relax a little. I started thinking maybe I was overthinking everything like I usually do. 10 minutes in, things shifted. Not all at once, just tiny cracks forming. He kept scanning the area, eyes flicking toward the station doors every few seconds. His leg bounced under the table even though he kept his upper body perfectly still. He asked if I had ever dated someone dangerous before, phrased casually like it was a joke, but he watched my reaction too closely. I answered honestly, said no, and laughed it off. He smiled back, but it didn't reach his eyes. He asked about my routines, where I usually hung out, what time I got home most nights. Questions that felt normal on the surface but started stacking up in my head in a way I didn't like. I told myself I was being paranoid. People ask questions on dates. That's the whole point. Then an officer walked over. At first, I didn't think it had anything to do with us. Cops walked around all the time there. But this one stopped right at our table. I noticed the way my date stiffened, like his body recognized the situation before his brain did. The officer looked at him, then at me, then back at him. The energy changed instantly. The air felt heavier, louder. The officer asked him something I couldn't hear over the traffic. Whatever it was, my date didn't answer right away. His jaw clenched. His hands curled into fists on his knees. I felt my stomach drop before I even understood why. The officer pulled out a small notebook and checked it, then looked back up. This time his attention stayed locked on my date. I watched the color drain from his face. He started explaining himself with his hands, pointing around us like location mattered, like being near the station somehow made it okay. That's when the officer said it. Not loud, not aggressive, just factual. He asked why my date was violating a restraining order. My brain lagged behind my ears. Restraining order. The words felt unreal, like something from a show I would read late at night. I looked at my date, searching his face for confusion or anger or anything that said this was a mistake. Instead, I saw panic. Raw and unfiltered. The kind you can't fake. Everything clicked at once. The insistence on meeting there, the cameras, the visibility. He didn't choose that spot to protect me. He chose it to protect himself. He thought being close to cops would make him untouchable, or at least make things look better if something went wrong. The officer asked me to step back. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the ground. People nearby started watching. I felt exposed, like every stranger suddenly knew I had walked into something bad without realizing it. My date kept trying to explain, his words tumbling over each other, but none of it seemed to matter. The officer asked for his identification. My date hesitated, then handed it over with shaking hands. Another officer joined them, then another. The situation grew bigger and louder without anyone raising their voice. I stood there frozen, watching the version of him I thought I knew dissolve completely. I learned pieces of the story without anyone telling it directly. The restraining order wasn't about some random conflict. It was about someone he was allowed to be near. Someone who probably lived not far from there. Someone he had convinced himself he could still orbit without consequences. And somehow I had been pulled into that orbit without knowing. They asked me if I knew him before today. I shook my head. They asked how we met. I pointed at my phone, still sitting on the table, screen dark but full of context. They nodded like this wasn't new information to them. My date kept glancing at me, eyes wide, like he wanted me to say something that would fix it. Like I could vouch for him. I couldn't even process my own name at that point, let alone his situation. My chest felt tight. My ears rang. The normal sounds of the street felt distant, warped. They walked him away from the table toward the station. Not in cuffs at first, but close enough that he couldn't bolt. He looked smaller with each step, like the confidence had been a costume that finally fell off. I noticed his phone buzzing in his pocket and wondered who was trying to reach him. An officer stayed with me, asking if I was okay, if he had threatened me, if I needed anything. I nodded even though I didn't know what I needed. Water maybe. Air, a rewind button. People slowly went back to their own conversations, interest fading once the drama moved away. After a while, they told me I could leave. My legs felt weak as I walked away from the cave, past the station, past the spot where I had stood waiting earlier, thinking this was the safest place to meet a stranger. The irony felt almost funny in a sick way. On the bus home, I kept replaying his messages in my head, the careful wording, the reassurance, the way he framed everything as concern for safety. I realized how easy it is for someone to use the idea of protection as a cover. How being near authority doesn't mean someone is harmless. Sometimes it means they are hiding in plain sight. I got home and sat on my bed, phone in my hand, staring at the app icon. I didn't delete it right away. I just looked at it, thinking about how close I came to meeting him somewhere else. Somewhere quieter. Somewhere without witnesses. The thought made my skin crawl. I eventually unmatched him. His profile vanished like it had never existed, but the memory stuck. Every time I pass that station now, I feel it all over again. The fake sense of security. The way danger can wear a calm smile and ask to meet where everyone can see. The night started with a bad sign that felt harmless at the time. My phone was at 12% when I left the house, and I told myself I wouldn't need it much anyway. Just directions, maybe a check-in text to a friend, then back home. It felt like one of those nothing nights that slip through your life without leaving a mark, the kind you barely remember. I was wrong about that part. We matched earlier that afternoon. Her profile was chaotic in a fun way. Blurry photos, weird angles, captions that didn't quite make sense but felt honest. She looked like someone who didn't overthink anything, which honestly sounded nice. Our messages were quick and casual. No deep talks, no big build-up. She suggested a bar downtown that was always busy and loud, said it was easier to relax there. I agreed without much thought. The bar sat on a corner with neon lights that never fully worked. One letter always flickered, casting the sidewalk in uneven colors. Inside was packed, the kind of place where you had to lean close just to hear yourself think. Music thumped through the floor, sticky from spilled drinks. I spotted her near the back, sitting at a high table, phone in her hand. She smiled when she saw me and waved me over. In person, she had this restless energy, like she couldn't stay still for more than a few seconds. She tapped her fingers on the table, bounced her knee, checked her phone, then flipped it face down. I didn't think much of it. Everyone checks their phone too much. I was guilty of it too. We grabbed drinks and talked about random stuff. Work complaints, favorite late-night food, dumb internet trends. Nothing deep, but it flowed. Every few minutes, though, she would glance over my shoulder, scanning the room like she was waiting for someone. Sometimes she would excuse herself to the bathroom and come back with her hair slightly adjusted, lipstick touched up like she had just restarted the night. After the second time, I noticed something weird. When she came back, she asked me the same question she had already asked earlier. Not in a forgetful way, more like she was resetting the conversation, like pressing restart on a game. I answered again, laughing it off, but a knot formed in my stomach. Her phone kept lighting up on the table. She never let it stay dark for long. She would pick it up, type fast, then put it down again. Once, she angled it away from me so sharply it was almost dramatic. I told myself she was just popular. Maybe a group chat blowing up. Maybe work stuff. The bar was loud enough that I couldn't fully sit with the thought anyway. About 40 minutes in, she leaned in closer, acting more engaged, asking more focused questions. It felt sudden, like a switch flipped. Then, just as fast, she pulled back again, eyes drifting to the other side of the room. She stood up and said she needed some air, then disappeared toward the front. I sat there alone, sipping my drink, watching the crowd. That's when I noticed something that made my chest tighten. 2 tables away, near the window, there was another guy sitting alone, looking at his phone, then looking up toward the bar entrance. He looked nervous in the same way I probably did earlier. A few minutes later, she walked over to him. She sat down at his table like it was the most normal thing in the world. Leaned in, smiled. Her body language changed again, softer, more focused. My brain struggled to catch up. I told myself she probably knew him. Maybe a friend. Maybe someone she ran into unexpectedly. But then she did something that erased that hope. She picked up her drink from his table. The same drink she had been drinking with me. My heart started pounding. I watched them from a distance, trying to piece together an explanation that didn't make me feel stupid. She stayed with him for maybe 10 minutes, then stood up and walked toward the bathroom. She didn't look at me as she passed. When she came back, she returned to my table like nothing happened. Sat down, smiled, asked if I wanted another round. My head buzzed. I nodded without thinking, mostly because I wanted to see how far this went. Part of me hoped I was wrong. Part of me needed confirmation. As the night went on, the pattern became impossible to ignore. She rotated. My table, the window table. Another one closer to the bar where a third guy sat, tall, wearing a jacket even though it was warm inside. She spent equal time at each, always resetting her energy, her posture, her laugh. It was like watching someone perform the same scene for different audiences. I felt like I was trapped in some weird social experiment. None of us seemed to notice each other fully, probably because the bar was so crowded and chaotic. She used the noise and movement as cover. Whenever she stood up, she made it seem casual, like she was just stretching or heading to the bathroom. Eventually, the guilt or the thrill or something else cracked her. She sat down across from me, phone in hand, hands shaking slightly. She didn't look at me at first. Then she took a breath and finally admitted it. She explained that she had 3 Tinder dates lined up at the same time. Same bar, different tables. She said it like it was a clever hack, like she was proud of the efficiency. She said she didn't want to waste time on people who might not click, so she figured this was faster. She said it was harmless because nobody was promised anything. I didn't know what to feel first. Anger, embarrassment, disbelief. My face felt hot. My ears rang. I looked around the bar and suddenly everything felt fake. The music, the laughter, the way people leaned into each other. It all felt staged, like a set built for lying. What messed with me the most wasn't even the rotating dates. It was how good she was at it. How naturally she shifted between versions of herself. With me, she was chill and sarcastic. With the guy by the window, she was soft and attentive. With the third guy, she was bold and playful. Watching her do that made my stomach turn. It felt less like dating and more like manipulation. I realized then that none of us really knew who she was. Not even a little. We were just slots in her night, time blocks to be filled and evaluated. I wondered how many times she had done this before. How many bars, how many tables, how many faces that thought they were special for a moment. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and walked away before she could say anything else. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want explanations. I just wanted out of that space. As I moved through the crowd, I caught the eye of the guy from the window table. He looked confused. I almost said something, almost warned him, but I didn't. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding insane. Outside, the air felt cold and sharp. I leaned against the wall and took a few deep breaths, trying to slow my heart down. Through the window, I saw her slide back into her seat with the third guy, smiling like the night was still young. On the walk home, every step felt heavy. My phone buzzed a few times. I did check it. I already knew who it was. I kept thinking about how easy it was for her to do that, how the app made it possible, how everyone inside that bar thought they were on their own separate night, when really it was all overlapping, tangled together. When I got home, I tossed my jacket on the floor and sat on my bed in the dark. The bar noise still echoed in my head. The music, the laughter, the way she moved between tables like it was a game. I didn't feel heartbroken or angry anymore, just unsettled, like I had seen behind a curtain I wasn't meant to look behind. Hey guys, really sorry to interrupt. If you're still listening, then you're enjoying the story so far. And if you are enjoying, then please hit that like button. That's all I ask of you. Thanks so much. Now back to the stories. There are nights that feel off before anything actually happens, like your body clocks it before your brain does. This was one of those. I remember standing in my room staring at my reflection, fixing my hair for the third time, feeling this low buzzing in my chest that wouldn't settle. Nothing specific was wrong. The plan was simple. Quick drink, casual meet, home early, the kind of date you barely tell anyone about because it feels forgettable before it even starts. We matched 2 days earlier. His profile wasn't bad, just kind of empty. Plain selfies, neutral smile, nothing that told you much. He messaged politely, almost stiff, like he was following a script he read somewhere. He suggested a small cafe bar near the train tracks, said it was quiet and low pressure. That sounded perfect to me. I wasn't looking for chaos. I just wanted a normal night. The place was already half empty when I arrived. Dim lights, worn wooden tables, that faint smell of cleaner mixed with old coffee. The kind of spot people go to when they don't want to be seen. I sat near the window and waited, watching the trains pass, feeling the vibrations in the floor every time one went by. He showed up late, but not ridiculously late. Just enough to make me notice. He looked more nervous than his pictures suggested. His shoulders were tight, his eyes darting around like he was checking for exits. He smiled when he saw me, but it didn't hold. It kept slipping off his face like it didn't fit right. We sat down and a server came over. I ordered a drink without thinking. When it was his turn, he asked for water only. No ice. He said it fast, like he didn't want to explain. I shrugged it off. Not everyone drinks, but something about the way he clutched the glass when it arrived made my stomach twist, like it was in anger. The conversation never really started. It kept stopping and starting like a car with engine trouble. He laughed at the wrong moments, answered questions too quickly or too slowly. He kept shifting in his seat, crossing and uncrossing his legs, pulling at the hem of his shirt. Every few minutes he wiped his hands on his jeans, even though they weren't sweaty. I tried to relax the vibe, talked about random stuff. The trains, the neighborhood, dumb stories from work. He nodded along, took tiny sips of water, eyes glued to the table. He barely touched his phone. that almost made it worse. Most people hide behind their screens when they're nervous. He looked like he was trying to outrun something internal. About 20 minutes in, he went quiet. Not just listening quiet. Gone quiet. His face tightened, jaw clenched, eyes unfocused. He shifted in his chair again, this time more urgently. I asked if he was okay, and he nodded too fast, knocking his glass slightly. Water sloshed onto the table. He didn't notice. Then it happened. He stood up so suddenly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. The sound cut through the room and made a few people turn. For half a second, I thought he was about to leave. Then the smell hit, thick and immediate, impossible to misunderstand. My brain refused to process it at first. I froze, staring at him, trying to make sense of what my senses were telling me. His face went pale. His eyes went wide. There was a dark spreading stain down the back of his pants. People nearby started reacting. Chairs shifting. Someone coughing. The server froze mid-step. He grabbed his jacket off the back of the chair and wrapped it around his waist, hands shaking so badly he could barely tie the sleeves. His movements were frantic but clumsy, like his body had stopped cooperating with him. He kept nodding at me, like if he nodded enough, I would understand something I didn't want to understand. He leaned toward me, still standing, and started gesturing wildly, trying to convince me with his hands and his face that this was some kind of joke. Like it was planned. Like it was funny. His eyes were begging me to play along. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. No one laughed. No one moved. The whole room felt suspended in this horrible pause. The smell got worse. I felt heat rush to my face, then drain out just as fast. I couldn't tell if I wanted to scream or disappear. He kept insisting with exaggerated expressions that it was a prank, like people do online for attention. Like this was a thing normal humans did on first dates. The desperation in his face made it terrifying instead of awkward. It felt less like a joke and more like a break from reality. The server finally snapped out of it and told him to leave. Not angry, just firm. Other people were staring openly now. Some disgusted, some confused. One person laughed nervously like they didn't know how else to react. I was still sitting there, unable to move, my drink untouched. He backed away slowly, jacket still wrapped tight, eyes never leaving me, like he was afraid I would expose him if I stood up. Then he turned and rushed toward the door, nearly slipping on the way out. The bell above the door rang as he left, cheerful and wrong. The room exhaled all at once. People started whispering. The server apologized to me, offered to move me to another table, asked if I wanted anything else. I shook my head. My stomach was churning. The smell lingered in the air like a bad memory that wouldn't clear. I sat there for a few minutes, staring at the condensation on my glass, trying to ground myself. My hands were trembling. I kept replaying his face in my head. The panic. The way he tried to rewrite reality instead of dealing with it. That part scared me more than the accident itself. I paid and left without finishing my drink. Outside, the cold air hit me hard, sharp and clean. It felt like waking up. A train thundered past just then, drowning out everything else for a moment. I stood there until it passed, just breathing. On the walk home, my phone buzzed, a message from him. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew it would try to explain, to soften it, to turn it into something else. I blocked him without reading a word. Later that night, laying in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about how fast the night had turned. How someone could unravel so completely in front of a stranger and then expect them to pretend it was planned. It was the mess that haunted me. It was the look in his eyes when he realized he couldn't undo it and tried anyway. I threw the clothes I wore that night straight into the wash. Even after, I kept thinking I could smell it. I know it was probably just in my head, but that didn't make it go away. Some things stick whether you want them to or not. I didn't think a photo could mess with my head that much. But that's the thing about nights that start harmless. They sneak up on you later, when you're alone and scrolling, when the room is quiet and your guard is down. At the time, it felt like one of those small moments you forget by morning. Just a quick picture. Just a smile. Nothing serious. I had no idea that single tap on her phone was about to follow me home. We matched early evening, right when the sky was turning that washed-out gray that makes everything look flatter than it really is. Her profile stood out because it wasn't trying too hard. Normal photos, group shots, a couple blurry selfies. She looked like someone who actually went outside instead of curating a brand. Her messages were fast and playful, not deep, not intense. She suggested grabbing food at a late-night spot near a river walk, said it was chill and always had people around. That sounded fine to me. I told my roommate where I was going, grabbed my jacket, and headed out. The place was one of those casual restaurants with big windows and metal chairs that scraped loudly on concrete floors. Music played just a little too loud. The smell of fried food hung in the air. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table near the window, phone on the table, screen up. In person, she was energetic, almost buzzing. She talked with her hands, laughed easily, leaned forward like she was fully present. It made me relax. We ordered food and talked about random stuff, the area, dumb things we had seen online, places we wanted to visit someday but probably wouldn't. It felt light. Normal. The kind of date that doesn't raise alarms. She kept taking pictures of her food. Different angles. Close-ups. Wide shots. I joked about it without really caring. Some people document everything. She asked me to lean in for one, like a casual table shot, but then stopped and said she wanted a better one later. She said she liked keeping memories, especially first ones. That didn't seem weird. Lots of people do that. After we ate, we walked along the river. The lights reflected off the water in a way that made everything look softer. She talked about how she liked collecting moments, not things. How photos helped her remember nights that would otherwise blur together. I nodded along, hands in my pockets, feeling like this was going fine. We stopped near a railing where the light was better. She pulled out her phone and asked if we could take a picture together. Just one. For memories. She said it with a smile that felt genuine. I hesitated for maybe half a second, then stepped closer. It didn't feel like a big deal. Strangers take photos together all the time now. It was part of the culture. She held the phone out, angled it slightly, and we smiled. The camera clicked. She checked it, nodded, and slipped her phone back into her pocket. That was it. No retakes. No posting right then. Just a moment captured and stored away. The rest of the night went smoothly. We walked a bit more, talked about nothing important, then parted ways without any dramatic expectations. She hugged me quickly and said she had fun. I walked home feeling neutral in a good way. Not excited, not disappointed, just fine. Later that night, I was laying in bed, lights off, scrolling out of habit. My phone buzzed with a notification from Facebook. I almost ignored it. I barely use it anymore, but the preview caught my eye. A friend of a friend had posted something new. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. At first, my brain didn't register what I was seeing. It was a photo of me, the same one we took by the river. My face lit by streetlights, half smiling, arms slightly awkward at my side. The caption above it made my stomach drop. Man I met from Tinder tonight. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I scrolled. There were more photos. Not just me. Different guys. Different backgrounds. Restaurant tables. Sidewalks. Bars. All taken the same night. All lined up like some kind of collection. My throat felt tight. I clicked on the post to make sure it was real. Comments were already rolling in. Laughing reactions. Jokes. People tagging friends. Someone asking which one was the best. Someone else making a comment about red flags. I felt exposed in a way I had never felt before. I zoomed in on my photo. She had tagged the location. Not my name, but close enough. Anyone who knew me could recognize me instantly. I thought about my coworkers. My family. Friends who still used Facebook more than I did. My face felt hot. My hands were shaking. I clicked on her profile. It was public. Recent posts. Selfies. Memes. Nothing that hinted at this being some kind of art project or joke. The album was just there, sitting between a brunch post and a random share about dating apps being wild. This wasn't hidden. This was casual. I scrolled through the album again. Each photo felt worse than the last. Some guys looked uncomfortable. Some looked drunk. Some looked happy, probably thinking the same thing I had earlier, that this was just a normal night. None of us knew we were being lined up like that. I went back to the comments. Someone asked if she was going to make it a series. Someone else said they couldn't believe the confidence. I felt small, like I had unknowingly stepped into someone else's performance. I messaged her immediately, fingers moving fast, heart racing. I told her to take it down. Told her I didn't agree to be posted like that. I watched the message deliver, then sit there unread. Minutes passed, then more. While I waited, I thought about the photo moment, how she framed it as memories, how harmless it sounded, how I didn't think to ask where those memories would live. I kept refreshing the post, hoping it would disappear. It didn't. Eventually, she replied. Her message was casual, almost confused. She said it was just for fun, said she didn't use names, said everyone else was fine with it. She added a laughing emoji at the end like that would soften it. I didn't respond. I reported the post. I asked Facebook to take it down. I don't know if that even did anything. The damage was already done. Screenshots exist forever. I knew that. I blocked her. Then I blocked a few people in the comments just in case. I turned my phone face down on the bed and stared at the ceiling, tried to slow my breathing. My mind kept replaying the night, looking for signs I missed. The way she liked documenting everything. The way she talked about collecting moments. The way she didn't hesitate with a camera. I barely slept. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened. I imagined someone I knew stumbling across the post, recognizing me, forming opinions without context. I felt stripped of control. The next morning, the post was gone. I don't know if she deleted it or if Facebook took it down. It didn't matter much. The image was burned into my head. The idea that I had been turned into content without knowing still sat heavy. I went about my day like normal, but everything felt off. Walking past people, I wondered who had seen it, who had scrolled past my face and laughed. The thought followed me around like a shadow. That night, I scrolled through my camera roll and noticed how few photos I had of myself. How careful I had been before without even realizing it. One small choice had undone that. I knew something was wrong before the food even came out, but I couldn't place it. It wasn't nerves or excitement, just this quiet pressure in my head, like when you're about to remember something important and it keeps slipping away. I remember sitting there under warm lights, the kind that make everything look softer than it is, and thinking how weird it was that I already wanted the night to be over even though nothing bad had happened yet. We matched earlier that week. His profile was confident in a loud way. Gym photos, mirror selfies, captions that tried too hard to sound casual. I almost swiped past him, but he messaged first, and the messages were smooth without being creepy. Just enough charm to feel intentional. He suggested dinner at a mid-range restaurant downtown, one of those places with big TVs on the walls, playing sports highlights and random slideshows when nothing was scheduled. It felt public and safe, so I agreed. The restaurant was packed when I arrived. Families, couples, groups of friends, all squeezed into booths and tables. The smell of grilled food hung heavy in the air. I spotted him already seated at a table near one of the TVs. He stood up when he saw me and smiled wide, like he was performing. I ignored the feeling in my gut and sat down. He talked a lot, about himself mostly. Work, gym routines, how busy his phone always was. He placed his phone face up on the table, screen lighting up every few seconds with notifications. He didn't seem embarrassed by it. If anything, he looked proud, like it proved something about him. I tried to steer the conversation toward normal topics. Hobbies, favorite places to eat, dumb things that don't matter. He nodded along but kept glancing at his phone. Every buzz pulled his attention away from me. He would flip the screen down for a second and flip it back up like he couldn't help himself. Our food arrived and things settled a bit. Forks scraping plates, background noise filling the gaps. I started to relax slightly. Then his phone buzzed again, louder this time. He picked it up and frowned, tapping the screen quickly. I didn't think much of it until the TV behind him flickered. At first, it was subtle. The sports highlights cut out for half a second, replaced by a blank screen. Then the tab changed completely. His phone screen was on the TV. Full size, bright, impossible to ignore. For a split second, my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. Then the words registered. Tinder messages. His profile picture at the top. Multiple conversations stacked underneath. Messages scrolling automatically like a slideshow. The room seemed to go quiet even though it didn't. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. The messages were not subtle. Not jokes. Not small talk. They were graphic in a way that made my face burn instantly. Suggestive comments. Promises. Compliments copied and pasted across different chats. People around us started noticing. Heads turned. Forks paused midair. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else gasped. The tub was mounted high, visible from almost every table. I looked at him. His face had gone stiff. His eyes were locked on the screen like he was watching a crash he couldn't stop. His hands hovered over his phone, tapping uselessly. Whatever setting he had triggered, he couldn't undo it fast enough. The messages kept cycling. One of the profile photos that popped up made my stomach drop. It was a woman sitting 2 tables away from us. I recognized her instantly because she had just walked past our table earlier to use the restroom. Same hair, same jacket, same face. Her photo on the screen was unmistakable. She noticed at the same time I did. Her head snapped up toward the TV. Then she looked at her phone, then back at the TV. The realization hit her hard. I could see it on her face. Confusion turning into anger, then humiliation. The tip showed another message thread with her name at the top. The timing was obvious. Messages sent earlier that day, maybe even during dinner. The implication hung in the air, heavy and awful. A server rushed over toward the 2 controls, fumbling with the remote. It took way too long. Every second felt stretched. The messages kept scrolling. Different women, different names, different words, all similar enough to feel mass-produced. I sat frozen in my seat, staring at the table and the TV, then him. I felt exposed even though none of the messages were about me directly. It was like being dragged into someone else's mess without consent. My chest felt tight. My ears rang. Finally, the screen went black. The sports highlights came back like nothing had happened. The room buzzed with whispers and side glances. People tried to pretend they hadn't seen anything even though everyone had. He didn't look at me right away. When he did, his expression was a mix of panic and calculation, like he was deciding which version of the story to try first. He reached for his phone, then pulled his hand back, unsure. I didn't wait. I stood up, legs shaky, grabbed my bag, and stepped away from the table. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. Heads turned again. I didn't care. I needed air. As I walked past the other tables, I caught the eye of the woman from the screen. She looked stunned, eyes glossy, jaw tight. There was a shared understanding between us that didn't need words. We had both been unknowingly pulled into the same lie. Outside, the night air felt sharp and cold against my face. I leaned against the wall of the restaurant, trying to slow my breathing. My hands were trembling. I could still see the messages in my head, blown up and unavoidable. My phone buzzed. I didn't check it. I already knew who it was. I didn't want explanations or excuses. There was nothing he could say that would make that moment disappear. After a few minutes, the woman from the restaurant stepped outside too. She stood a few feet away from me, arms crossed, staring at the sidewalk. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The silence said enough. She eventually walked off in the opposite direction. I waited a bit longer, then headed home. The city felt louder than usual. Every screen I passed made me flinch slightly. When I got home and dropped my bag by the door and sat on my bed in the dark, I thought about how close I had come to trusting him. How confident he had been. How easily a technical mistake had exposed everything he was hiding. I blocked him without opening any messages. I didn't want to see his name again. I opened the app and stared at the screen for a while, thumb hovering. Then I closed it. Later that night, I kept replaying the moment that took change. How fast a normal dinner turned into something public and humiliating. How technology can betray someone, but also reveal exactly who they are when they think no one is watching. The image of that screen stayed with me longer than I expected. Not because it was shocking, but because it was honest in a way his face never was. I didn't even want to go out that night. I remember sitting on my bed with my shoes half on, scrolling through nothing, telling myself I could cancel and nobody would care. Something about the day felt heavy, like it had already used up all its good moments before the sun went down. But I went anyway, because that's what I always do. I convinced myself that staying home is worse than rolling the dice, even when my gut says otherwise. We matched that morning. Her profile was soft and calm, lots of outdoor photos, a smile that didn't look forced. She said she was single, recently out of something serious, just trying to get back into normal life. That sounded honest enough. Our messages weren't flirty or intense. More like 2 people easing into a conversation without expectations. She suggested dinner at a small place near the edge of downtown, somewhere quiet with dim lights and booths. It felt low risk. The restaurant was tucked between a laundromat and a closed bookstore. Inside, it smelled like garlic and warm bread. The lights were low enough that everyone looked better, but not so low that it felt fake. She was already there when I walked in, sitting in a corner booth, phone on the table, drink untouched. She looked nervous when she stood up to greet me. Not in a bad way. More like she cared how it went. That made me relax. We sat down and ordered food, and the first part of the night felt normal. Surprisingly normal. We talked about work, family, dumb habits we couldn't break. She laughed easily, leaned in when she listened, made eye contact. It felt like an actual date, not an interview. She mentioned being single again more than once, but casually, like she was reassuring herself as much as me. She said she wasn't seeing anyone else, that she didn't like juggling people. That stuck with me because it felt specific. Unnecessary even. I didn't ask, but she offered it anyway. Halfway through dinner, I noticed she kept checking her phone. Not constantly, but enough to be noticeable. She would glance at it, flip it face down, then do it again a few minutes later. I didn't think much of it. Everyone has someone in their life who doesn't respect dinner boundaries. Our food came, and the conversation slowed in that comfortable way that happens when you're both chewing and just existing in the same space. I started thinking maybe this could turn into something real. Not forever, but at least a second date. Then her phone rang. She had set it down near the edge of the table, screen facing up. When it lit up, she reached for it too late. Her hand fumbled, and she hit the wrong button. The call went to speaker. The voice on the other end filled the booth instantly. It took my brain a second to catch up to the words. The voice wasn't angry at first. It sounded confused, concerned. It asked why she wasn't where she said she would be. Then it mentioned the reservation, then the anniversary. That word landed hard. The entire booth went silent except for the phone. I could hear the hum of the restaurant around us, the clink of silverware, but everything felt distant. She froze, eyes wide, color draining from her face. She scrambled to grab the phone, hands shaking, and finally ended the call. The silence after was worse. I sat there, staring at the table, trying to process what I had just heard. Anniversary dinner meant something serious. Not casual thing. Not complicated, maybe. It meant someone at home was waiting. Someone who thought tonight mattered. She didn't look at me right away. When she did, her eyes were glassy, like she was already halfway to crying. She started explaining, fast and messy, words tumbling over each other. She said it wasn't what it sounded like, said things were complicated, said they were technically done but still lived together, said the anniversary didn't mean anything anymore. None of it landed. My chest felt tight, like the air had been sucked out of the booth. I thought about how calm she had been earlier, how confidently she said she was single, how she had looked me in the eye and said she wasn't juggling anyone. The disconnect made my head spin. I'd asked for the check without finishing my food. My appetite was gone. The waiter looked confused, but nodded and walked away. She sat there, hands wrapped around her glass, staring at the condensation like it might give her answers. She kept talking, trying to rewrite the story in real time, saying she felt trapped, saying she needed an escape, saying tonight was supposed to be harmless. Every sentence made it worse. I didn't want to be anyone's escape. I didn't want to be a secret or a placeholder or a mistake. The check came. I paid my part and stood up. My legs felt weak, like I had been sitting too long. She stood too, reaching out slightly like she might grab my arm, then stopping herself. Her face was a mix of panic and regret. I walked out without looking back. Outside, the night air felt colder than I expected. The street was quiet, just a few cars passing, their headlights streaking across the pavement. I stood there for a second, breathing in, trying to steady myself. My hands were shaking. As I started walking, my phone buzzed. Her name lit up the screen, then again, and again. I didn't answer. I didn't need to hear more explanations. I already knew enough. On the way home, my mind kept replaying the moment the phone went to speaker. How one small mistake had blown everything open. How easily she had slipped between versions of her life. The person on the phone thought he was talking to his future. I had thought I was talking to someone free. When I got home, I tossed my jacket over a chair and sat on the edge of my bed. The room felt too quiet. I kept thinking about the person on the other end of that call. The confusion in his voice. the way his night had probably just shattered without him even knowing why yet. I blocked her number and unmatched her. The app went quiet again. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the building settling, trying to let the night drain out of me. What stuck with me wasn't just the lie. It was how close I came to stepping into someone else's life without knowing it. How easily I could have been folded into a story I never agreed to be part of. I went to sleep eventually, but the image of that phone lighting up on the table kept flashing behind my eyes. Some moments don't fade quietly. They just sit there, waiting for you to remember them again. The moment I saw there were two of them standing there, my stomach dropped, but I told myself not to be dramatic. I remember slowing my steps on the sidewalk, pretending to check my phone, hoping maybe one of them would peel off and head somewhere else. They didn't. They stood shoulder to shoulder under the streetlight like they were waiting for an interview, not a date. That's when I should have turned around. Instead, I kept walking, already convincing myself this was just one of those awkward Tinder stories you laugh about later. We matched a few days earlier. His profile was normal, maybe a little too normal. Clean photos, simple bio, nothing that stood out as a red flag. He messaged politely, not too much, not too little. When we talked about meeting up, he mentioned he might bring his best friend for safety. He said it casually, like it was no big deal. I hesitated, but he explained it was just until he felt comfortable. And then the friend would leave or do their own thing nearby. I didn't love it, but I understood the logic enough to agree. We were meeting at a coffee place that stayed open late, one of those spots that turns into a study hall at night. Big windows, harsh lights, tables packed close together. Public enough to feel safe, quiet enough to talk. When I walked up and saw both of them waiting, that logic started to fall apart. He smiled and waved. The friend didn't. The friend just stared at me like I was already failing some invisible test. They both looked similar in a weird way. Same height, same build, same kind of haircut. I remember thinking they looked like alternate versions of the same person, like someone copied and pasted but changed a few details. We went inside together and sat at a table near the back. The friend sat directly across from me. My date sat to the side. The dynamic felt off immediately. Instead of easing into conversation, the friend took over. Not in a protective way. More like an examiner. They asked me questions one after another. Where I worked, where I live, what my schedule looked like, how often I went out, what I was looking for. It didn't feel like curiosity. It felt like a checklist. My date mostly stayed quiet, nodding along, occasionally adding a comment that felt rehearsed. I tried to answer lightly, adding jokes, keeping things casual. The friend didn't react to the jokes. They just moved on to the next question. Their eyes stayed locked on me the entire time. I started to feel like I was under a spotlight. After a while, the roles shifted without warning. The friend leaned back, suddenly relaxed, and my date leaned forward, taking over the questions. Same topics, same tone. It was subtle but noticeable. The friend started watching me instead, like they were studying my reactions to this change. I felt uneasy but couldn't explain why. People are awkward. Maybe they were both nervous. Maybe this was their weird dynamic. I kept trying to ground myself in logic. We got our drinks and sat there for what felt like forever. Every few minutes, one of them would get up to grab napkins or check something near the counter. When they came back, the energy shifted again. Sometimes my date was warm and engaged. Sometimes distant and quiet. Sometimes a friend cracked jokes and tried to charm me. Other times they went back to cold and analytical. It started to feel intentional. I noticed they would glance at each other when they thought I wasn't looking. Quick looks. Small nods, like they were communicating silently. My chest felt tight. I started answering shorter, watching them more closely. At one point, the friend leaned in and asked me what I thought about people who test others in relationships. The question felt loaded. Before I could fully respond, my date interrupted and changed the subject, laughing it off like it was nothing. The friend smiled then, slow and knowing. The realization hit me slowly, like a bad taste that doesn't go away. They weren't there for safety. Not really. They were there to observe, to compare, to see how I reacted to different versions of the same person. They were switching roles. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The posture changes, the tone shifts, the way one would mirror the other depending on how I responded. It was like they were running an experiment. Sometimes one acted confident and outgoing, other times withdrawn and serious. They were watching to see which one I leaned toward more. Who got more eye contact? Who made me laugh? Who answered more fully? I felt sick. The worst part was realizing this probably wasn't new. The way they moved through it felt practiced, like they had done this before and refined it. I wondered how many people had sat at this table before me, unknowingly participating in the same test. My heart started racing. I checked the time on my phone and told them I couldn't stay much longer. The friend immediately leaned in, suddenly warm, asking if everything was okay. My date pulled back, arms crossed, watching. The switch was so obvious it was almost insulting. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and said I had to go. Neither of them moved at first. Then they both stood at the same time. The friend stepped closer than necessary, asking if I wanted to meet again, just one-on-one. My date watched my face carefully, like the answer mattered more than it should have. I didn't answer. I just walked out. Outside, the cold air hit me hard. My hands were shaking. I walked fast, not looking back, my mind replaying everything. The questions, the switches, the looks they shared, the way I had been evaluated without knowing. Halfway down the block, my phone buzzed. A message from my date, then another from the friend. Different wording, same intent, both trying to recover control of the situation. I blocked them both without responding. When I got home, I sat in my bed fully dressed, staring at the wall. I felt stupid for not trusting my instincts sooner. But more than that, I felt violated in a quiet way, like my reactions and personality had been dissected for someone else's entertainment or decision-making. Later that night, I thought about how easy it is to turn dating into a game when you forget there's a real person on the other side. How some people don't just want connection, they want data. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them sitting across from me, switching masks, watching closely. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it stayed with me longer than any obvious red flag ever had. I should have known something was off the moment she wouldn't budge on the location. Most people argue about coffee versus drinks or inside versus outside. She did. She insisted we meet at her place like it was the most normal thing in the world. No hesitation. No backup option. She framed it as relaxed and easy, said she hated loud places and preferred being comfortable. I told myself it was just confidence. Looking back, that was me ignoring a blinking warning light. We matched midweek. Nothing special about the timing or the vibe. Her profile leaned wholesome. Lots of smiling photos, family-looking shots, captions about loving home-cooked meals and quiet nights. It felt almost refreshing after too many chaotic profiles. Our messages were polite, steady, almost old-fashioned. She asked about my job, my schedule, what I wanted long-term. That should have tipped me off, but I just thought she knew what she wanted. When I suggested grabbing food somewhere public, she gently shut it down, said her place was better, said she had already cooked, said it would feel more real. She dropped her address like it was nothing. I hesitated, stared at the message for a while, then agreed. I told a friend where I was going and headed out, trying to ignore the tight feeling in my chest. Her house was in a quiet neighborhood with identical lawns and streetlights that buzzed faintly, the kind of place where nothing ever seems to happen. When I pulled up, I noticed there were already 2 cars in the driveway. That was the first moment I actually paused. I told myself maybe roommates, maybe family visiting. Lots of maybes. She opened the door before I knocked. She smiled wide, waved me in, and that's when I saw them. Her parents were sitting on the couch, not passing through, not grabbing coats, fully settled, shoes off, drinks on the table. The tab paused like they had been waiting. Her mom smiled first, warm but curious. Her dad stood up slowly, sizing me up without trying to hide it. My brain scrambled to make sense of it. This wasn't mentioned, not even hinted at. I stood there awkwardly, holding a bottle of soda I had brought like an idiot, feeling my face heat up. She acted like nothing was strange, took my jacket, guided me into the living room, introduced me like this was a planned event. Her parents greeted me politely, but there was an intensity behind it, like I had just stepped into a test I didn't study for. We sat down. The table was already set with plates and food. Everything felt staged, too ready. Her mom asked me questions right away, where I worked, where I grew up, what my plans were. Her dad watched closely, barely speaking, just observing. She sat between us, smiling, nodding, clearly comfortable. I tried to keep up, answering as calmly as I could, but my heart was racing. I kept waiting for her to explain, to laugh and say this was a surprise. She did. She leaned into it like this was exactly how the night was supposed to go. Halfway through eating, it finally came up. She casually mentioned I was the third Tinder date that week. The way she said it made my stomach drop. Not embarrassed. Not apologetic. Just factual. Then she added that her parents wanted to meet the serious one. That they had met the other two already. The room felt smaller instantly. Her mom nodded like this made perfect sense. Her dad finally spoke, asking what made me different. Why I thought I deserved to be there. I felt like I was being compared to invisible people, measured against conversations I wasn't part of. It hit me then. This was a date. This was an audition. She had turned her dating life into a rotating interview process, and her parents were fully involved. I wasn't special. I was scheduled. Slotted into a week like an appointment. My chest felt tight. I glanced at the door, calculating how fast I could leave without causing a scene. But the pressure of the situation froze me in place. I didn't want to be rude. I didn't want to make it worse. So I stayed, answered questions, forced smiles. They asked about finances, about timelines, about where I saw myself live in 5 years. Her mom mentioned grandchildren casually, like she was discussing weather. I felt dizzy. This was too much, too fast, too invasive. I looked at her, hoping to see discomfort or regret. Instead, she looked pleased, proud, even, like this was her plan working perfectly. The more time passed, the more trapped I felt. I realized she had probably told her parents things about me I didn't know, framed me in a certain way before I even arrived. I wondered what she had said about the other two, what made them fail. After what felt like hours, I finally stood up and said I had to leave. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. Her parents looked surprised, but not upset. Her mom hugged me like we were already family. Her dad shook my hand firmly, telling me to drive safe. She walked me to the door, still smiling. Outside, under the porch light, she finally asked if I wanted to see her again. The question felt unreal. Like the night had already crossed every boundary. I told her I didn't think we were on the same page. She frowned slightly, like that answer didn't compute. Then she nodded, already moving on in her head. I walked to my car feeling hollow. My hands shook as I unlocked the door. As I drove away, I glanced in the mirror and saw her standing there watching, phone already in her hand. I wondered if she was messaging the next person. When I got home, I sat in my car for a long time before going inside. The quiet felt heavy. I kept replaying the night, the couch, the questions, the way my life had been dissected by strangers who thought they had a right to it. Later, she messaged me, thanking me for coming and wishing me luck. No apology. No acknowledgement of how overwhelming it was. Just polite closure. I had unmatched her and put my phone down. I didn't feel angry, just unsettled, like I had stepped into a future that wasn't mine and barely escaped. Some dates end awkwardly. Some end badly. This one ended with me realizing how easily someone can turn another person into a checkbox without caring how it feels on the other side. I noticed the exits before I noticed him, which feels backwards now but made sense then. The place had 3 ways out, one by the bar, one near the bathrooms, and one through the kitchen that staff used. I clocked all of them because I always do in crowded places. I didn't realize I was about to spend an entire night watching someone else do the exact same thing, only with a level of panic that felt wrong. We matched late at night when I couldn't sleep. His profile wasn't flashy, just regular photos, slightly outdated maybe, but nothing alarming. His messages were calm, friendly, almost overly polite. He suggested a small diner that stayed open late, said he liked quiet places where you could actually hear someone think. That sounded fine to me. I wasn't in the mood for loud music or packed bars. The diner sat on the edge of town, one of those places with cracked vinyl booths and fluorescent lights that never quite stopped buzzing. It smelled like coffee and fryer oil soaked into the walls. When I walked in, he was already there, sitting stiffly at a booth near the wall. He stood up too fast when he saw me, nearly knocking his knee into the table. Right away, something felt off. He was sweating. Not a little. Like full on, dark patches spreading under his arms, beads forming on his forehead even though it wasn't hot inside. He wiped his face with a napkin, then another. He apologized for it without me asking, said he ran there. I nodded and tried to ignore it. We sat down and ordered. He barely looked at the menu. Asked for water only. When it came, he downed half the glass in one go, then immediately asked for a refill. His leg bounced under the table so hard I could feel it through the seat. I tried to start normal conversation. Asked about his day, his work, basic stuff. He answered, but his eyes kept drifting, not to me, to the doors. Every time someone walked in, his shoulders tensed. Every time someone stood up, he followed them with his eyes until they sat back down or left. He laughed at random moments that didn't match what I said, like he was trying to prove he was engaged without actually listening. I started to feel uneasy. This wasn't nerves. This was something else. He asked me questions too, but they were strange. Not personal, just oddly specific. How often I came to this side of town, if I usually stayed out late, if I lived alone or with people. I gave vague answers, my stomach tightening with each one. At one point, a couple of uniformed officers walked past the window outside. They weren't coming in, just passing by. The effect on him was immediate. His face drained of color. His hand clenched around his glass so hard I thought it might crack. He leaned back slightly like he wanted to disappear into the booth. I asked if he was okay. He nodded too quickly, took another long drink of water, and forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He wiped his hands on his jeans, leaving damp marks behind. The food arrived and sat mostly untouched. He poked at it without eating much. His appetite seemed non-existent. He kept checking his phone, but never unlocked it, just glancing at the screen like he was timing something. The longer we sat there, the more tense the air felt. My shoulders ached from being on edge. I started planning an exit in my head. Maybe I would pretend I wasn't feeling well. Maybe I would say I had to work early. Anything to end this without setting him off. Then the door opened again. This time the officers came inside. They didn't rush. They didn't make a scene. They walked in calmly, scanning the room. When their eyes landed on our booth, everything clicked at once. I felt it in my gut before anything else happened. He saw them too. The change in him was instant. All the restless energy drained out, replaced by something heavy and defeated. His shoulders slumped. His hands dropped to his lap. The sweating somehow got worse, like his body had given up pretending. They approached the table. People around us started paying attention. Forks paused mid-air. Conversations dropped to whispers. The buzzing lights suddenly felt louder. One of the officers said his name. He didn't argue, didn't ask why, didn't look confused. He just nodded slowly, like this was inevitable. They asked him to stand up. He did, hands shaking, water glass tipping over it and spilling across the table. Nobody moved to clean it. They guided him away from the booth. As they did, he finally looked at me. Really looked at me. His expression wasn't angry or scared. It was apologetic in a way that made my skin crawl. He started explaining as they walked him toward the door. Not to them. To me, like it mattered what I thought. He admitted he had been on the run. Said he couldn't go too long without talking to people or he would lose it. Said Tinder dates helped him stay social. Helped him feel normal. He said it like it was a coping strategy, not something dangerous. The words hit me like ice water. The officer stopped him from saying more and continued guiding him out. The door closed behind them, bell ringing softly like nothing had just happened. The diner slowly came back to life. Conversations resumed. Plates clinked. Someone laughed nervously. I sat there alone, staring at the puddle of water on the table, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. My hands were shaking. I didn't realize how tense I had been until it was over. A server came over, eyes wide, asking if I was okay. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure what okay meant anymore. I asked for the check even though I had barely eaten. My appetite was completely gone. As I waited, my mind replayed the night from the beginning. The sweating, the exit checking, the questions, the panic at the sight of uniforms. It all made horrible sense now. I felt stupid for not leaving sooner, for brushing off every warning sign. But more than that, I felt violated. Used. I had been part of his attempt to feel normal while actively hiding from something serious. I wondered what he had done. I didn't want to know. The possibilities made my chest tighten. I paid and walked out quickly, the cold air hitting me like a slap. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing hard, trying to ground myself. A police car pulled away down the street, lights off. I watched it disappear. On the way home, every siren made me flinch. Every shadow felt heavier. I kept thinking about how casually he had said it, like dating was just another tool to blend in, like I was a prop. When I got home, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it for a second, eyes closed. My phone buzzed. A notification from the app. His profile was gone. Either deleted or taken down. It didn't matter. I sat on my bed fully dressed, staring at the wall, letting the night replay in fragments. The exits, the sweat, the way he watched the doors like they were taking bombs. The moment everything caught up to him. I didn't sleep much. When I finally did, I dreamed of sitting in that booth again, watching the door open over and over, never knowing which time would be the one that changed everything. The moment she stood up and said she needed the bathroom, I remember thinking how perfectly normal everything felt. That sounds dumb now, but that's the truth. Nothing dramatic, nothing tense. Just another midweek night that blended into all the others. If you'd asked me right then, I would have said this date was forgettable in the best way. Safe, easy, already fading. We matched the day before. Her profile had that cozy vibe people try to sell without trying too hard. Soft lighting, messy room in the background, captions about liking late dinners and long walks without making it sound deep. Our messages were chill. Not flirty, not dry. Just steady back and forth. She suggested a casual place near a college area, said it was always busy enough to not feel awkward. I agreed without hesitation. The restaurant was loud in that comfortable way. Indie music playing, people talking over each other, glasses clinking constantly. We sat at a small table near the wall, close enough to other people that it felt public but still personal. She smiled a lot, leaned forward when I talked, kept her phone face down the entire time, which honestly felt refreshing. We ordered food, talked about random stuff, laughed at things that probably weren't that funny. It felt like a first date that's headed toward a second. Nothing intense. No oversharing, just two people killing time together. About 30 minutes in, she glanced toward the back of the place and said she needed the bathroom. She stood up, grabbed her bag, and smiled like she would be right back. I nodded, took a sip of my drink, and watched her weave through the tables toward the hallway. That was the last time I saw her. At first, I didn't notice anything wrong. I scrolled on my phone, replied to a message from a friend, listened to the music. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I figured maybe there was a line. Busy places always have lines. 15 minutes went by. My food got cold. I checked the hallway again. Nothing. I started to feel that familiar, awkward pressure of being the person left alone at a table. The server walked by a couple times, glancing at the empty chair across from me. I gave a half smile like everything was fine. 20 minutes. I texted her, asking if everything was okay. The message delivered. No response. I told myself not to overthink it. Phones die. Bathrooms get busy. People lose track of time. Then someone sat down. Not her. I looked up confused, expecting an apology, but instead I saw a guy I had never seen before. He was calm in a way that immediately made my chest tighten. Not rushed. Not embarrassed. He slid into the chair across from me like it belonged to him. Before I could even process what was happening, he nodded at me like we were already mid-conversation. His posture was relaxed, hands folded on the table. He looked around the restaurant briefly, then focused on me with unsettling focus. He thanked me for coming. Those words didn't register right away. My brain stalled, trying to catch up. Thanked me for coming implied intention, planning, awareness. This was a mistake. He explained that he was her boyfriend. Not ex. Not complicated situation. Current. He said it without anger, without edge, like he was stating the weather. He mentioned she had gone home through the back exit, that she did like confrontation. My heart started pounding. I felt heat rush to my face and drain out just as fast. People around us kept eating, laughing, living. Nobody noticed that my reality had just flipped upside down at a sticky restaurant table. He went on, still calm, still controlled. He said he had been meeting the people she went out with. Not all of them. Just some. He said it helped him understand patterns, understand stories. He leaned in slightly and asked which app I met her on. Not in a jealous way. In a data collecting way. He explained he was comparing timelines. comparing how she talked to different people, what details stayed consistent, and which ones changed. He said it like this was a project they were working on together, like a shared hobby. My hands were shaking under the table. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what was safe to say. Every instinct told me this was not normal, not a joke, not some messy relationship moment. This was something rehearsed. I answered his question because my body went into autopilot. I told him which app. He nodded, pulled his phone out, and typed something into his notes. I could see other entries already there. Dates, times, app names, maybe even names. He thanked me again, apologized for the inconvenience, said she wasn't trying to hurt anyone, just trying to figure herself out. He said that like it justified everything. I asked where she was now. He said she was probably home. That she didn't like to watch these conversations happen. That was his role. That sentence stuck with me, his role. I looked around the restaurant again, suddenly hyper-aware of exits, of the way sound bounced off walls, of how normal everything looked from the outside. I wondered how many other tables had hosted moments like this without anyone noticing. He told me he appreciated my honesty, said some people lied when asked, said it made his comparisons harder. He smiled slightly at that, like it was a mild inconvenience, not something deeply unsettling. I stood up, chair scraping loudly against the floor. My legs felt weak. I grabbed my jacket and bag, hands fumbling. He stayed seated, watching me, unbothered. As I walked away, I felt his eyes on my back. Not threatening, not angry, just observant, like I was another data point leaving the room. Outside, the air felt cold and sharp. I stood on the sidewalk for a minute, breathing hard, trying to steady myself. My phone buzzed. A message from her. A simple apology. Said she wasn't ready to talk. Said she hoped I understood. I didn't respond. On the walk home, my mind kept replaying everything. The timing, the bathroom excuse, the empty chair, the way he slid into the conversation like it was planned. I realized this wasn't the first time, probably not even close. When I got home, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, eyes closed. My heart was still racing. I felt embarrassed, angry, confused, all at once. But more than anything, I felt used in a way that was hard to explain. Like I had been invited into a story that wasn't mine just so someone else could take notes. Later that night, I unmasked her, blocked the number, deleted the app for a while. Not a fear exactly, more like exhaustion. The idea that people could involve strangers so casually in their private mess made my skin crawl. What stuck with me was that she left. It was that she didn't just disappear. She sent a replacement, someone whose job was to clean up the aftermath and file it away. I still think about that chair sometimes, the way it did stay empty, the way someone else decided they could fill it without asking. Some dates end awkwardly. Some end badly. This one ended with me realizing I had never really been alone at that table in the first place. The thing that still messes with me is how normal it felt right up until it didn't. Not good, not bad, just average in that quiet way that makes your brain relax. I remember thinking this would be one of those dates I barely remembered a week later. No story, no drama, just a checkmark night. That thought didn't even get to finish forming before everything went sideways. We mashed on a slow afternoon when nothing else was happening. His profile was oddly polished. Clean photos, neutral backgrounds, captions that sounded like they had been edited too many times. Not creepy, just optimized. He messaged fast, always replied within minutes, always with the same calm tone. It felt less like flirting and more like customer support, but I didn't hate it. It was easy. We agreed to meet at a small ramen place near a transit hub. Always busy, always loud, always people coming and going. The kind of place where you don't feel trapped. When I got there, he was already seated, phone on the table, screen bright. He smiled, waved, stood up halfway, then sat back down like he wasn't sure what the correct move was. He was nice. Not charming, not awkward, just nice. Asked polite questions. Nodded at my answers. Laughed when I laughed, but a half-second late, like he was checking a cue. Every few minutes he glanced at his phone, not to text, just to check it, like he was monitoring something. We ordered food and the conversation stayed light. Work stuff. Random hobbies. Dumb things people say to fill space. I noticed he avoided opinions. Everything was neutral. Everything was safe. If I said I liked something, he said it sounded cool. If I complained, he agreed, but didn't add much. It felt like he was trying not to trigger anything. Halfway through eating, he asked how the date was going so far. Not in a flirty way. More like a survey question. I laughed and said it was fine. He nodded and made a small note on his phone. I assumed he was texting someone or writing a reminder. I didn't think much of it. Then he turned his phone toward me. The Tinder app was open. Not our chat, a different screen, a rating screen. Stars lined up across the top. My name underneath. He asked me to rate the date Liv. I actually laughed, out loud. I thought it was a joke, like some self-aware bit about modern dating. I told him 4 stars and reached over to tap it myself, still smiling, still thinking this was harmless. The moment the 4th star lit up, everything changed. His face dropped, not confused, not annoyed, terrified. His hands started shaking. He grabbed the phone back like I had touched something dangerous. His breathing sped up. His legs started bouncing hard enough that the table shook slightly. He looked around the restaurant like someone was watching. He started talking fast, words tripping over each other. He said that wasn't good. Said 4 stars wasn't neutral. Said anything less than perfect got flagged. Said they punished men for that. The way he said punished made my stomach twist. I stopped smiling. The joke feeling evaporated instantly. I asked what he meant, but he was already spiraling. He said the app tracked everything. Response times, ratings, micro-reactions. He said a 4-star rating could drop his visibility, could change who he was shown to, could mark him as unsafe or low value or something worse. He kept checking the app, refreshing, scrolling through screens I had never seen before. Graphs, percentages, little warning icons. He muttered about shadow ranking and decay, about how hard it was to recover once the system decided something about you. I sat there frozen, chopsticks hovering uselessly over my bowl. People around us laughed and talked, completely unaware that my date was having a quiet meltdown over a star rating. He asked if I could change it. I told him I didn't know if that was possible. He insisted it was. Said there was a window, said timing mattered. He leaned closer, voice low, eyes wide, like he was sharing a secret that could get him in trouble. He said he needed 5 stars. Said anything else told the system the date failed. Said failed dates stacked up. Said stacked failures made things happen. I asked what things. He hesitated, then said matches disappeared. Said messages stopped delivering. Said profiles got buried. Said sometimes people got warnings. Sometimes worse. He didn't explain worse. He just shook his head. I felt a chill run through me. Not fear exactly. Unease. Like I had stumbled into a belief system I wasn't supposed to see. He wasn't joking. He wasn't trying to manipulate me into liking him more. He genuinely believed this. He kept apologizing for asking. Kept saying he shouldn't have involved me. Then kept insisting he had no choice. That transparency mattered. That the system rewarded honesty. I glanced at my phone, half expecting to see the app glowing on its own. Nothing. Just notifications from friends. The normal world felt very far away. I told him I could rate 5 stars if it mattered that much. That I didn't want him stressed. That seemed to make it worse. He flinched, like I had offered something dangerous. He said force ratings were detected. Said intention mattered. Said the system knew when someone was lying. My heart started racing. This was no longer awkward. This was disturbing. He started explaining his strategy. How he optimized dates. How he timed questions. How he avoided jokes that could land wrong. How he tracked feedback patterns. How he had spreadsheets at home. How he adjusted his personality depending on what the app rewarded that month. I realized then that I wasn't on a date. I was part of an ongoing experiment, a variable, a data point. He said the app was his main way to stay connected. Said real life was too unpredictable. Said the system made things fair. Said if you followed the rules, you were protected. Protected from what, he didn't say. I pushed my bowl away, appetite gone. I told him I needed some air. He nodded too fast, eyes never leaving his phone. He was already deep in the app again, tapping, scrolling, whispering to himself. I stood up and walked toward the door, my legs shaky. Halfway there, I glanced back. He hadn't noticed I was leaving. He was hunched over the table, lit by the glow of the screen, face tight with concentration. Outside, the noise of the street hit me hard. Buses hissing. People shouting. Normal chaos. I leaned against the wall and took a few deep breaths, trying to ground myself. My phone buzzed. A notification from Tinder. A prompt asking if I enjoyed my date. I stared at it for a long time. I closed the app without answering. When I got home, I sat on my bed and thought about how easily systems slip into people's heads. How something designed to be casual can turn into a scoreboard. How fear can hide behind the word algorithm. Later that night, he messaged me, apologizing. Said he hoped he didn't scare me. Said he just cared a lot about doing things right. Said the app had changed his life. I didn't respond. I had matched him and then turned my phone face down. What stayed with me wasn't the rating thing itself. It was the look on his face when he thought he had failed something invisible. Like a judge had marked him down and he knew the consequences even if I didn't. I still think about those stars sometimes. How casually I tapped one less than perfect. How much weight he thought it carried. How different our realities were sitting at the same table. I knew the night was going to be strange before I even left my place, not in a dramatic way, just this dull sense that I was borrowing time that didn't belong to me. The sky looked off, like the clouds were stuck in place, and my phone kept freezing as I tried to check directions. Nothing big, nothing obvious, just enough tiny things stacking up to make me feel like I should stay home. I didn't. I never do. We matched earlier that week. Her profile was simple but intense, lots of tired-looking selfies, captions about working nights and living off coffee. She joked about being half awake all the time. It felt relatable. Our messages were short but consistent. She warned me early that her schedule was weird, that she worked nights and had to be careful about timing. I assumed hospital, security, something like that. She didn't say exactly where, just that night's paid better. We planned to meet at a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. One of those places with cracked booths, buzzing lights, and menus sticky from decades of spills. It felt appropriate for someone who lived backwards. When I got there, she was already inside, sitting in a corner booth, hoodie pulled up slightly, phone face down. In person, she looked more tired than her photos. Not in a bad way. More like she'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. She smiled when she saw me, but it flickered, like it took effort. She apologized for looking drained and said nights messed with her head. I told her it was fine. I meant it. We ordered food and talked about random things. She was funny in a dry way. Sarcastic without being mean. She kept checking her phone, but always subtly, sliding it closer, tapping the screen once, then setting it back down. She said it was just habit from work, always checking updates. I believed her. About halfway through, she told me she had a shift later. Said she had to leave by a certain time. I glanced at the clock and did the math. It didn't make sense. Her shift would have already started. I figured maybe she meant later. Night shifts blur time anyway. She excused herself once to the bathroom and took her phone with her. When she came back, she seemed more relaxed, like she had fixed something. Her shoulders dropped. She leaned back into the booth and laughed more easily. I didn't question it. Then the door slammed open. The sound cut through the diner like someone snapping their fingers. Heads turned. Conversations stalled. A man stormed inside, face red, eyes locked straight on our table. He didn't hesitate. He walked fast, purposeful, like he had already decided how this was going to go. He started yelling. Not at me, at her. His voice filled the diner, sharp and angry, words tumbling over each other. People stared openly now. Forks paused midair. The server froze near the counter. The man accused her of being clocked in, accused her of stealing time, accused her of lying straight to his face. She went pale instantly. He slapped his phone down on the table between us, screen lit up with some kind of tracking app. Little dots, timestamps, a location pinned miles away, her workplace. It showed her as active, present, clocked in the entire time we had been sitting there eating fries. My heart started pounding. I looked from the phone to her, trying to understand. She stared at the screen like it had betrayed her. Her hands shook as she reached for her own phone. The man kept going louder now. He said she had been pulling this for weeks. Said she thought she was clever. Said the system flagged it this time. Said he drove out himself to catch her in the act. He gestured around the diner like this was a courtroom, and we were all witnesses. People started whispering. Someone near the window pulled out their phone. The room felt tight, like the walls had crept closer. She tried to explain, speaking fast, but nothing landed. The man interrupted constantly, pacing, pointing at the screen. He said she was using her phone to fake location data. Said she left it at work or spoofed it or whatever trick she had learned online. Said she was getting paid to sit here with me. That part hit me hard. I felt heat rush to my face, embarrassment, anger, confusion. I hadn't just been on a date. I had been part of her shift, an unknowing prop in whatever scheme this was. She looked at me then, eyes wide, pleading, not asking for help exactly, just asking me not to make it worse. I didn't know what to do. My body felt locked in place. The man finally noticed me properly. His anger shifted direction for half a second, then settled into something colder. He asked who I was. Not kindly, not curious, like he was filing a report. She answered for me, voice barely audible, explaining we met online. The word Tinder came out and seemed to make everything worse. He laughed, harsh and loud, shaking his head. He said this wasn't the first time. Said she always had excuses, always had stories. The server finally stepped in, asking him to lower his voice or leave. He ignored them. Kept ranting about stolen hours, about trust, about consequences. He said she was done. Said she shouldn't bother coming back. Said payroll would handle the rest. Then he turned and left as suddenly as he came, door slamming behind him. The diner slowly came back to life, but the tension lingered like smoke. She sat there frozen, staring at her phone. Tears welled up, but didn't fall. She looked empty, like the night had drained whatever she had left. I didn't know what to say. Nothing felt appropriate. Everything felt intrusive. After a moment, she stood up, grabbed her jacket, and muttered an apology without really looking at me. She said she had to go. Not to work, just go. I nodded. I didn't stop her. She walked out into the night, shoulders hunched, foam clutched tight in her hand like it might explode. I stayed seated, staring at the untouched food between us. The server came over quietly and asked if I wanted the check split. I told him I would just pay mine. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my card. As I walked out, the cold air hit me hard. The parking lot was almost empty now. Her car was gone. The boss was gone. It was like the whole thing had evaporated, leaving only the after image. On the drive home, my mind replayed everything. The phone checks, the bathroom break, the way she relaxed afterward. I realized she hadn't been worried about the date at all. She had been worried about being caught. I got home and sat in my car for a while before going inside. My phone buzzed. A message from her. She apologized again. Said she didn't mean to drag me into it. Said nights were hard and money was tight. Said she thought she had it under control. I didn't respond. I unmatched her and set my phone down. The silence felt heavy but clean. What stuck with me wasn't the yelling of the scene. It was the idea that while I thought we were sharing a moment, she was technically somewhere else the entire time. Clocked in, tracked, watched by a system she thought she could outsmart. I had been eating pancakes in a booth, laughing at dumb jokes, while a digital version of her was standing at work, logging hours that weren't real. Two versions of the same person, neither fully present. I went to bed late that night, exhausted, thinking about how many people are never really where they say they are anymore. How easy it is to be in two places at once until it all collapses. I should have trusted the way my stomach tightened when he said he wanted to cook for me. Not because cooking is bad, but because he said it like it was a test he needed to pass, like the whole night depended on it going perfectly. I remember staring at my phone after that message, rereading it, noticing how many times he mentioned wanting to impress me. It felt heavy for a first date, but I brushed it off and told myself I was being dramatic. We matched a few days earlier. His profile leaned hard into the wholesome angle. Lots of kitchen photos. Captions about loving homemade meals and quiet nights. He talked about food a lot, about how cooking for someone was his love language, even though we barely knew each other. He suggested coming over to his place instead of going out, said restaurants were loud and fake. I hesitated then agreed, mostly because I was tired of crowded places and small talk. He sent his address and told me what time to come. I told a friend where I was going, just in case, and headed out as the sun started to drop. His apartment building was older brick exterior, narrow hallways that smelled faintly like cleaning supplies and something burnt. That should have been a clue. He opened the door smiling wide, already wearing an apron. The inside of his place was small but clean. Dishes stacked neatly. Spices lined up on the counter like decorations. The kitchen was cramped, barely enough room for two people to stand without bumping into each other. He was nervous, visibly so. Hands shaking slightly as he moved around, checking the stove, adjusting knobs, or checking a recipe on his phone. He kept apologizing for nothing, saying he wanted everything to be just right. I told him to relax, that it was fine, but he didn't seem capable of relaxing. He poured me a drink and told me to sit at the small table near the kitchen. I watched him move back and forth, oil heating in a pan, ingredients laid out like a plan. He kept glancing over at me, smiling, and looking back at the stove with intense focus. The conversation was choppy. He would start a sentence, trail off, then start another. His attention was split between me and the pan. The oil started to smoke slightly. I noticed it before he did and mentioned it. He waved it off, said it was normal. It wasn't. A second later, the oil flared. At first, it was just a flash. Then the flames climbed, licking up the sides of the pan, reaching higher than the stove. The smoke alarm went off immediately, shrill and overwhelming. My heart jumped into my throat. He froze. For a full second, he just stood there staring at the fire like his brain had shut down. I shouted for him to turn off the stove, but he didn't move fast enough. The flames grew, fed by the oil, bright and angry. Then he panicked. Instead of grabbing a lid or stepping back, he did something I still struggle to process. He turned away from the stove, fumbled with his pants, and started peeing directly onto the fire. Time slowed in the worst way. The smell hit instantly. Burnt oil mixed with something acidic and awful. The flames hissed and sputtered, but didn't go out completely. Some of it splashed onto the floor. I screamed and backed away, pressing myself against the wall, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. He kept apologizing the entire time, voiced high and frantic, saying he didn't know what else to do, saying he had seen it work in movies. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely aim. The smoke thickened, curling toward the ceiling, setting off the alarm again, even louder. Finally, the fire died down enough that he snapped out of it. He turned off the stove, slipped on the wet floor, and caught himself on the counter. The kitchen was a disaster. Smoke everywhere. The pan blackened, the floor soaked. I was frozen, staring at him, my brain struggling to catch up with what had just happened. Before I could even speak, there was a loud knock at the door. Then another. Neighbors must have called it in. The alarm had been screaming for too long. Within minutes, the hallway filled with noise. Boots, voices, heavy steps. Firefighters pushed inside, filling the small apartment with their presence and bright gear. They took control fast. Windows opened, fans set up. The remaining smoke cleared slowly. One of them asked what happened, and he tried to explain, tripping over his words, gesturing wildly. I stood off to the side, arms wrapped around myself, feeling like I was watching someone else's nightmare. The firefighters looked at the pan, the stove, the floor, then at him. Their expressions shifted from concern to disbelief. One of them stepped aside and quietly told him what he should have done instead. He nodded over and over, eyes wide, absorbing nothing. The entire time, he kept glancing at me. Even while firefighters were in his kitchen, even while the floor was wet and the air still smelled awful, he kept apologizing to me, saying he ruined everything, saying he hoped this didn't completely destroy his chances, asking if we could laugh about it someday. That was the part that unsettled me the most. He wasn't focused on the danger, or the mess, or the fact that he could have seriously hurt someone. He was focused on the date, on whether this disaster meant he wouldn't see me again. After the firefighters finally left, the apartment felt eerily quiet. The alarm was off. The stove was shut down. The kitchen looked like the crime scene scrubbed halfway clean. He stood there, shoulders slumped, apron stained, eyes red from smoke and panic. He turned to me and started talking again, still apologizing, still trying to spin it into something awkward but funny. He asked if I wanted to reschedule, said he could order takeout next time, said second chances mattered. I didn't respond right away. My ears were still ringing. My heart was still racing. I grabbed my jacket slowly, hands shaking, and told him I needed to go. My voice sounded distant, like it wasn't fully mine. He followed me to the door, still talking, still asking questions I didn't answer. When I stepped into the hallway, the smell of smoke followed me. Neighbors' doors were cracked open. People stared. I felt humiliated and overwhelmed and angry all at once. Outside, the cold air hit me like a wall. I stood there for a moment, breathing hard, trying to steady myself. My clothes smelled like smoke and oil. My head hurt. My phone buzzed almost immediately. A message from him. More apologies, more explanations, more attempts to minimize what had just happened. He asked if I was home safe, then asked again about a second date. I didn't respond. I blocked him before I even reached my car. On the drive home, my hands were still shaking on the steering wheel. Every red light felt too long. My brain replayed the moment over and over. The flames, the panic, the choice he made when things went wrong. When I got home, I threw my jacket straight into the wash and took a long shower, scrubbing at my skin like I could wash the night off. Even after I felt unsettled, like something was stuck under my ribs. It wasn't just the fire. It was how fast he fell apart. How his instincts failed him. How he couldn't step back and think, even with someone else in danger. And how somehow his biggest concern was still whether the date could be salvaged. I went to bed exhausted, the smell of smoke still lingering in my hair no matter how much I washed it. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flare of the fire and the look on his face when reality hit. Some dates end awkwardly. Some end badly. This one ended with sirens, smoke, and the clear realization that some people should never insist on cooking for anyone until they can handle the heat. The call came while I was brushing my teeth, which somehow made it worse. I remember staring at our reflection, toothpaste foam at the corner of my mouth, phone vibrating on the sink like it had something urgent to confess. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, at which I had. Answering it is what split my week cleanly into before and after. 2 days earlier, I had been sitting across from her in a coffee shop, thinking the weirdest part of the night was how serious she looked the entire time. No jokes landed, no small talk drifted, just focused eye contact and careful questions, like she was studying me instead of meeting me. We matched on Tinder late one night. Her profile was minimal. One clear photo, no bio except a line about being careful who she met. She messaged first and said she preferred direct honesty or flirting. That felt refreshing at the time. Our messages were short and practical. Where we worked, what part of town we live in, what we were looking for. It felt more like a screening than a chat, but I told myself that was just modern dating. She suggested meeting at a quiet cafe near a library. Daytime. Public. Safe. She said safety mattered to her more than vibes. I agreed. Honestly, it made me feel like she had her head on straight. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting near the window, phone face down, bag tucked under her chair. She barely smiled when she saw me, just nodded and gestured for me to sit. Right away, the energy felt heavy. Not awkward, deliberate. She asked questions that felt rehearsed, where I worked exactly. How long I had lived in the city. If I lived alone. If anyone knew I was there. I answered, a little uneasy but not alarmed. People worry. Especially women. I got that. About 10 minutes in, she leaned forward slightly and said she needed to ask something important. She said she had been burned before. Said she didn't trust apps anymore. And she asked if she could see my aide, just for safety. My stomach tightened. I hesitated, but she explained it calmly. Said she never met anyone without verifying who they were. Said it made her feel in control. She promised she wouldn't take a photo. Just wanted to see that my name matched my face. She even offered to show hers after. I thought about refusing. I really did. But the way she framed it made refusing feel suspicious. Like I would be the one raising a red flag. So I reached in my wallet and handed it over. She held it longer than I expected. Not just a glance. She studied it. Flipped it slightly to catch the light. Her eyes moved slowly across the card, like she was memorizing it. I remember noticing how still her hands were. No shaking. No nerves. Just focus. She handed it back and thanked me. Did show me hers. Did apologize for asking. Just moved on like it was done. The rest of the date was flat. Not bad. Just empty. She asked fewer questions. Seemed distracted. Checked her phone once or twice. After about 30 minutes, she said she had to go. Stood up, thanked me for meeting, and left without any kind of goodbye ritual. No hug. No awkward pause. Just gone. I walked home feeling unsettled but unable to explain why. I told myself I was overthinking it. Chalked it up to mismatched energy. I had matched her that night and moved on. Or at least I thought I did. 2 days later, my phone buzzed while I was brushing my teeth. I wiped my mouth, answered, and heard a voice introduce themselves as police. The word hit me like a punch to the chest. My mind raced through every possible thing I could have done wrong. Parking tickets, missed jury duty, something stupid I forgot. They asked if I was me, full name, date of birth. I confirmed, heart pounding. Then they asked if I had been using Tinder recently. I said yes. They paused, then asked why my identity was being used across multiple fake Tinder profiles. The room felt like it tilted. They explained slowly like they were talking to someone in shock. Several reports had come in. Profiles using my name, my age, my photos. Photos I recognized immediately. Some pulled from my social media, some from places I had been, some from angles I didn't remember posing for. The accounts were messaging people, arranging meetups, then disappearing. In a few cases, things escalated. Complaints were filed. That was how it landed on their desk. I sat down on the edge of the tub, my legs weak. My reflection in the mirror looked wrong, like I was watching someone else react. I told them I had no idea what they were talking about, that I hadn't made any fake profiles, that I barely even used the app anymore. They asked if I had shared my ad with anyone recently. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. The cafe, her face, the way she studied the card, the request framed as safety. I told them about her, about the date, about the ad. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. It listened without interrupting, which somehow made it worse. They said I was in trouble. Not yet. But they needed to ask more questions. They asked where I had met her, what name she used, what photos were on her profile. I answered everything I could remember, realizing how little I actually knew. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, phone in my lap, heart still racing. The bathroom felt too quiet. Every sound in my apartment felt amplified. I locked the door even though I was already inside. Over the next few days, it got worse. I was asked to come in and give a statement. They showed me screenshots. Profiles that looked like me but felt wrong. Bios written in a tone I would never use. Messages sent at times I was asleep or at work. Some polite, some aggressive, all wearing my name like a mask. One profile had used the same cafe photo from my social media that I had posted months earlier. Another used a cropped version of a picture taken the night of that date. I didn't remember her taking any photos, but there it was. My face, slightly blurred, background unmistakable. I felt exposed in a way I didn't know was possible. They asked if I recognized any of the matches. I didn't. Strangers. Normal people who thought they were talking to me. Some had agreed to meet. Some had waited at places I had never been. One had filed a complaint after being stood up repeatedly by who they thought was me. I thought about how easily she had asked for my aid, how reasonable it sounded, how quickly I had handed over something that tied my face to my full legal identity. It made me feel sick. The police said they were investigating. Said identity misuse like this was becoming more common. Said apps made it easy. Said people trusted strangers too quickly. I nodded, but it all felt abstract. This was a statistic. This was my name floating around the city, attached to things I did do. For weeks after, I flinched every time my phone rang. Every unknown number made my chest tighten. I changed privacy settings on everything. Locked down my social media. Deleted photos. I even read through old messages, trying to see if I had missed something, if there were other signs. I couldn't stop thinking about her. Not in a romantic way. In a fragmented, unsettling way. The calm voice. The serious expression. The way she took my eye like it was a tool, not a boundary. I never heard from her again. Her profile was gone. Any trace of her online vanished. It was like she had never existed, except for the damage she left behind. Eventually, the calls from police slowed. The fake profiles were taken down. The situation quieted, but it didn't feel resolved, just dormant. Even now, when someone asks to see my ad for any reason, my pulse spikes. I hesitate. I ask questions. I think back to that cave, to how safe everything felt on the surface, and how wrong that was. What messes with me most is how easily it happened. How little it took. One date, one card, One moment of trust framed as responsibility. I still use dating apps, but differently, slower, more guarded. I never show my id, never let anyone hold it, never assume safety requests are harmless. Some nights, I still wonder how many people talk to a version of me that wasn't real. How many stories exist out there with my face in them, told by strangers who think they met me and didn't. I remember thinking the night felt staged, like a set that looked normal until you noticed the walls were too close together. Nothing bad had happened yet, but the air felt tight, like something was waiting for its cue. I had that restless feeling in my chest where you keep shifting your seat even though you're comfortable. I ignored it because I always do, because ignoring it is easier than admitting you might be walking into something you can't walk back out of cleanly. We matched earlier that week. His profile leaned calm and mature, not flashy, not trying to be funny. He said he was divorced, living alone, starting over. There was a seriousness to the way he wrote that made it sound final, like a chapter fully closed. Our messages were steady and polite. He talked about routine, about quiet nights, rebuilding. It felt grounded, adult. I like that. We agreed to meet at a mid-range restaurant near a shopping plaza, the kind of place that always smelled like bread and cleaning spray. Lots of booths, lots of families, nothing intimate enough to feel risky. When I got there, he was already waiting, hands folded, phone face down. He stood up when he saw me, smiled in a practiced way, and pulled out my chair like he had done this 100 times. The first part of the date was fine. Not exciting, not awkward, just fine. He talked about work, about how he was adjusting to live alone again, about learning how to cook for one. He mentioned the divorce casually, like a fact that no longer carried weight. Said it was mutual. Said they wanted different things. Said they were still respectful. I noticed he avoided specifics. No timeline. No details. But I didn't push. Not everyone wants to unpack their past on a first date. Our food arrived and the restaurant filled up around us. The noise level rose just enough to make the space feel alive. I started relaxing, thinking maybe the uneasy feeling was just first date nerves. Then I saw her. She walked in with purpose, eyes locked on our table like a target. She didn't hesitate or scan the room. She knew exactly where she was going. Her presence cut through the restaurant in a way that made people look up without knowing why. He noticed her at the same time I did. The color drained from his face so fast it scared me. His shoulders tensed. His hand moved toward his phone, then stopped. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. His body language said everything. She reached our table and didn't slow down. She slapped a thick stack of papers down between us. The sound was sharp, loud enough to turn heads nearby. Silverware rattled slightly. The papers spread out just enough for me to see what they were. Printed Tinder messages. Screenshots formatted, organized. His name at the top. Profile photos I recognized from the app. Messages sent at different times, different days. Long threads, short ones, compliments, promises. The dates at the top of each page were recent. Painfully recent. She didn't sit down. She stood there, hands braced on the table, eyes burning holes into him. Then she turned to me. She asked which lies he told me. Not yelled, not whispered. Just asked, clear and direct, like this was an interview, and I was the last reference she needed to check. My heart started pounding so hard I felt dizzy. The restaurant noise faded into a low hum. I stared at the papers, my brain struggling to process how quickly everything had unraveled. He finally spoke then, scrambling, trying to control the situation, but she cut him off immediately. She explained without raising her voice. She said they were not divorced, not separated, not even close. She said she had found the messages by accident, then found more, then more. She said she wanted to see who he was lying to and how. She gestured to the stack of paper like it was evidence in a trial. She said she had printed everything. Every profile. Every conversation. She said she wanted answers, and she wanted them in person. People were staring openly now. A server froze nearby, unsure whether to intervene. I felt trapped in my seat, like standing up would make it worse. She looked at me again and repeated the question in a different way, asking what version of him I had been sold. Asking what story he had chosen for me. My mouth went dry. I felt heat rush to my face. Embarrassment layered on top of shock. I told her the truth, voice shaky, explaining that he said he was divorced, let alone starting over. The words felt flimsy as soon as they left my mouth. She nodded slowly like she was checking off a box. She said that was one of his favorites. She said he rotated stories depending on who he was talking to. Sometimes divorced, sometimes separated, sometimes staying for the kids, sometimes claiming the marriage was over and everything but paperwork. He sat there frozen, eyes darting between us, hands clenched. He looked smaller than before, like the confidence had been a costume that no longer fit. She asked if he had mentioned counseling. I said no. She said that one was new. She asked if he had talked about wanting a future soon. I said vaguely. She said that was standard. Every answer I gave seemed to confirm something she already knew. The weight of it settled in my chest. I wasn't special. I wasn't different. I was just another variation in a pattern she had finally decided to confront directly. She turned back to him then, voice still calm but sharp, and asked how many more there were. He tried to speak again, but his words tangled and fell apart. Nothing, he said, landed. Nothing could. After a long moment, she gathered the papers back into a neat stack. The control she had over herself was almost scarier than if she had yelled. She told him she would be expecting honesty at home. She told him this was his last chance to stop humiliating everyone involved. Then she looked at me one last time. She apologized. Not for the scene, but for dragging me into it. She said I didn't deserve to be blindsided like that. The apology felt genuine, which somehow made it worse. She walked out of the restaurant without looking back. The silence she left behind was suffocating. He finally looked at me, eyes glossy, mouth opening like he wanted to explain. I stood up before he could. My legs felt weak, but I didn't want to hear anything else. There was nothing he could say that would untangle what had just happened. I grabbed my bag and stepped away from the table. People watched openly as I walked past, their curiosity heavy on my back. I felt exposed, like my private life had been projected onto the walls. Outside, the air felt cold and clean compared to the restaurant. I stood there for a moment, breathing hard, trying to ground myself. My phone buzzed immediately. A message from him. Then another. I didn't open them. I blocked him before I reached my car. On the drive home, my hands shook on the steering wheel. My mind replayed the night in fragments. The calm way he talked about being divorced. The practiced tone. The lack of detail. The way his face collapsed the moment she walked in. I kept thinking about the stack of papers. The effort it took to print them. The decision to confront him publicly. How much pain had to pile up before someone chose that road. When I got home, I kicked off my shoes and sat on the floor, back against the couch, staring at nothing. I felt embarrassed, angry, and weirdly sad for her, even though she was the one who had control in the end. Later that night, I read through our messages again, seeing them with new eyes. The careful wording, the half-truths, the gaps where details should have been. It all felt obvious in hindsight. What stuck with me most was the confrontation. It was how easily he slipped between lives. How smoothly he presented different versions of himself to different people, all while believing none of them would ever overlap. I unmatched him on the app and deleted the conversation. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I didn't want to see his name again. Some dates end with awkward goodbyes. Some end with regret. This one ended with a paper trail slapped onto a table, proof that the story I was told never existed in the first place. The night felt like it was already ending before it really started, like I had walked into the last chapter of something without reading the rest. I remember checking the time on my phone while I was tying my shoes, thinking how strange it was that I wasn't excited or nervous, just heavy. Not sad exactly. Just weighed down, like I was about to borrow someone else's emotions and not know where to put them afterward. We matched that afternoon. Her profile looked calm in a fragile way. Soft lighting, tired eyes, captions about liking slow evenings and quiet places. She didn't joke much in messages. She typed like she was choosing each word carefully, apologizing as she took a few minutes to respond. She said she had just gotten out of something, but said it lightly, like it was already behind her. I didn't question it. We agreed to meet at a small wine bar tucked behind a bookstore, the kind of place people go to talk instead of be seen. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a corner table, phone in her hand, screen glowing against her face. She smiled when she saw me, but it felt delayed, like her brain was somewhere else and had to catch up. The first part of the date was quiet, but okay. Not awkward, just subdued. She talked about work, about being tired all the time, about how she felt like she was always catching up to her own life. I listened and nodded, filling in gaps with light comments. I kept telling myself this was just a mellow person. Not every date has to be electric. She checked her phone a lot, not in a rude way, more like reflex. Every buzz made her glance down quickly, then flipped the screen face down again. I didn't say anything. I assumed it was friends, maybe family. People always have someone pulling at them from another direction. About halfway through, something shifted. Her voice cracked mid-sentence. She stopped talking and stared at the table, fingers tightening around her glass. Her breathing changed. Shallow, uneven. I leaned forward slightly, unsure what to do. Then she started crying. Not quietly, not dramatically, just tears slipping down her face like her body had finally decided it couldn't hold everything in anymore. She tried to wipe them away and laughed in a way that didn't match anything. People nearby glanced over, then looked away, pretending not to notice. She apologized over and over, shoulders shaking, saying she didn't mean to do this. She took a deep breath and told me the truth in fragments, like she was pulling it out of herself piece by piece. She said she had just broken up with someone earlier that night. Not an ex from weeks ago. Not something unresolved from the past. Someone she had been on a Tinder date with that same evening, before me. The words landed hard. My chest tightened. I felt like the room tilted slightly. She explained they had gone out, talked for hours, and she had decided it wasn't right. She ended it there face to face because she didn't want to ghost him. She said she thought she was being mature. She said she thought she could handle it. As she spoke, her phone buzzed again on the table. She glanced at it, and her face crumpled even more. She told me it was him, still texting, apologizing, saying he understood, saying he didn't, asking what he did wrong, sending long messages that kept coming no matter how many times she didn't respond. She turned the phone over, but it kept vibrating softly against the table like a heartbeat that wouldn't stop. I didn't know what to say. Everything I had planned to say on a first date felt wrong now. Jokes felt inappropriate. Reassurance felt misplaced. I wasn't a friend. I wasn't a therapist. I was just someone who had walked into the aftermath of something that wasn't finished. She kept talking, words spilling faster now. She said she thought going on another date would help her feel normal again. Said she didn't want to sit at home and replay the conversation. Said she hoped meeting someone new would reset her brain. Instead, it had cracked her open. She said she felt cruel. Said she felt empty. Said she didn't know why she kept doing this to herself or to other people. She cried harder then, shoulders shaking, hands trembling. The phone buzzed again. I could see the notifications piling up when the screen lit briefly. Paragraphs, not just quick messages. He was unraveling on the other end, and I was watching the echo of it in front of me. The bar felt too small, the music too loud, the lights too warm. I felt like I was intruding on something deeply private even though I was sitting right there. I offered her a napkin. She took it and wiped her face, mascara smearing slightly. She laughed again, embarrassed, saying this was the worst first impression ever. She asked if I hated her now. I told her I didn't hate her, but my voice sounded hollow to my own ears. I didn't know what I felt yet. Sympathy tangled with discomfort. Understanding tangled with the urge to leave. She looked at me like she was searching for permission. Permission to fall apart. Permission to stop pretending. Permission to not be okay. I felt the weight of that look settle on my chest. She told me she hadn't even gone home between the two dates. Had just walked around the block until it was time to meet me. Said she still smelled like his cologne on her jacket and hated herself for noticing. That detail stuck with me. I realized then that I wasn't really there with her. Not fully. Part of her was still sitting across from someone else, replaying a conversation that had ended an hour ago, but hadn't ended at all. The buzzing stopped suddenly. She glanced at her phone and flinched, then said he had finally stopped texting. She didn't look relieved. She looked worse, like the silence hurt more than the messages. She asked me what she should do. That question hit me harder than anything else. I wasn't equipped for that. I hadn't signed up to guide someone through the emotional wreckage of another date. I barely knew her last name. I told her I thought she needed time. Time that didn't involve strangers from apps. Time to sit with what she was feeling instead of outrunning it. The words came out gentler than I expected, but firm. She nodded slowly, like she already knew that but needed to hear it out loud. She stared at the table for a long moment, then finally looked up at me. She said she was sorry for wasting my time. That word, wasting, made something twist in my stomach. The night hadn't been a waste exactly. It had just been something I didn't know how to hold. We sat there in silence for a bit, the kind that stretches and presses in on you. I paid for my drink and stood up slowly. She stood too, wiping her face one last time, looking smaller than before. Outside, the air felt cooler and cleaner. The street was quiet, bookstore lights still on, pages visible through the window. She hugged herself instead of reaching for me. I nodded and wished her well. It felt like the only honest thing left to do. As I walked away, my phone buzzed. A notification from Tinder. Another match. I ignored it. On the walk home, my mind replayed the night in layers. Her tears. The buzzing phone. The idea that I had been scheduled right after someone else, like emotional overlap, was just part of the process now. I thought about the guy texting apologies into the void, unaware that his pain was bleeding into someone else's date. When I got home, I sat on my bed with my jacket still on, staring at the wall. I felt heavy in a way that wasn't mine, like I had carried someone else's breakup home with me by accident. Later that night, she messaged me to apologize again. Said she hoped I didn't think she was a terrible person. Said she understood if I never wanted to talk again. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because anything I said would either comfort her or cut her off, and I didn't feel right doing either. I wasn't the person she needed, and she wasn't in a place to meet anyone honestly. I had unmatched her and turned my phone face down. What stayed with me wasn't the crying, it was the timing. How easily one person's ending slid into another person's beginning. How apps make it possible to stack emotions without giving them space to settle. I went to sleep late, thinking about how many dates aren't really dates at all, just pauses between unfinished goodbyes. I noticed the pattern before I understood it, which is usually how these things go. It wasn't alarming at first, just odd enough to register in the back of my head. Every time the conversation started to feel settled, every time the food arrived or the noise level dipped, he would glance toward the hallway and excuse himself. At first I thought nerves, then maybe a bad stomach. I didn't expect it to turn into one of the strangest nights I've ever had in a public place. We matched a few days earlier. His profile leaned goofy, lots of self-deprecating jokes, pictures that weren't flattering but felt honest. He messaged in bursts, like he typed everything at once and then disappeared. It felt human. He suggested a casual restaurant near the mall, nothing fancy, somewhere with booths and low expectations. I agreed because it sounded easy. The place was busy when I got there. Families, couples, groups of friends, the usual hum of a midweek dinner rush. He was already seated, waving a little too enthusiastically when he saw me. He looked nervous but excited, smiling wide, tapping his fingers on the table. The first bathroom trip happened before we even ordered. He apologized, stood up quickly, and disappeared down the hallway. I shrugged it off. People get anxious. Maybe he just needed a minute. He came back flushed, sat down, and jumped straight back into talking like nothing happened. We ordered food. 5 minutes later, he was gone again. This time, I noticed the server glance toward the hallway as he passed. Not annoyed, curious. When he came back, he laughed it off, blaming the restaurant water. I smiled politely and kept the conversation going. I didn't want to embarrass him or make it weird. But it kept happening. Every 10 minutes or so, he would vanish. Sometimes for a minute, sometimes for 5, sometimes long enough that I would start checking my phone, wondering if he had slipped out entirely. Each time he returned, he looked more stressed, sweat at his temples, hands shaking slightly. His jokes started missing the mark. His focus drifted. The smell started creeping in too. Faint at first, easy to dismiss as restaurant funk. Then stronger. Something sour that didn't belong near food. I shifted in my seat, trying not to make a face. I felt bad for him. Whatever was happening clearly wasn't under control. I told myself to be patient. People have bad nights. After the 4th trip, a nearby table started whispering. I caught fragments of it. Hallway. Plumbing. Again, my stomach tightened. He came back that time looking panicked. He barely sat before standing again, muttering something about needing air. He headed toward the bathrooms, then hesitated, turned, and walked toward the back of the restaurant instead. That's when the manager approached me. She didn't make a scene. She crouched slightly beside the table, voice low, expression tight with forced calm. She asked if I was with the man who had been sitting there. I nodded, confused. She explained carefully that there was a situation. She said every toilet in the men's bathroom was clogged. Not one, all of them. She said staff had tried to fix it, but it was beyond them now. She said they believed my date was responsible. My face burned with embarrassment. I felt like everyone in the room was suddenly looking at me, even though most people were still eating, unaware. The manager continued, glancing toward the kitchen doors. She said he had been attempting to leave through the kitchen to avoid being confronted. She said staff had stopped him for the moment, but they needed to know if I was involved or if I wanted to handle it myself. I sat there stunned, my brain struggling to connect the man I had been talking to with this image of chaos behind closed doors. The repeated bathroom trips, the smell, the panic, it all snapped into place in the worst way. I told her I had no idea, that I had just met him. My voice sounded small even to me. She nodded, clearly believing me. She said she would handle it. She asked if I wanted to leave through the front or wait a moment. I chose to leave. As I stood up, I saw movement near the kitchen. Him, hovering near the swinging doors, eyes darting, apron wearing staff blocking his path. He looked like a trapped animal. When he saw me, his face collapsed. He started toward me, hands raised, mouth moving fast, but the manager stepped in front of him. I didn't hear what was said. I didn't want to. I grabbed my jacket and walked toward the entrance, heart pounding. The smell was stronger now, lingering in the air like proof of something that couldn't be undone. People near the hallway were covering their noses. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else complained loudly. Outside, the cool air hit me hard. I stood there for a second, breathing deep, trying to process what had just happened. The door swung open behind me, and I heard raised voices, the manager firm and controlled, his tone frantic and pleading. I walked away without looking back. Halfway to my car, my phone buzzed. A message from him. Then another. Then another. Apologies. Explanations. Blaming food poisoning. Blaming stress. Blaming anything but himself. He asked if I was okay. Asked if we could laugh about it later. Asked if I would give him another chance somewhere else. I didn't respond. I blocked him before I reached my car. On the drive home, I kept replaying the night in my head, the patience I had given, the signs I had ignored, the way I had tried so hard to be understanding while the situation spiraled out of control behind the scenes. What unsettled me most wasn't the plumbing disaster. It was the attempt to escape. The decision to sneak through the kitchen instead of facing the mess he caused. That instinct told me more about him than anything he had said at the table. When I got home, I threw my clothes in the wash, even though they didn't smell that bad. I just wanted the night gone. I sat on my bed scrolling through nothing, trying to calm down. Later, I checked the app out of habit. His profile was still there. Same jokes, same smiling photos. No hint of what had happened an hour earlier. It made my skin crawl how easily someone could reset and try again like nothing went wrong. I unmatched him and closed the app. I didn't tell many people about that night. It sounds fake when you say it out loud, like a gross joke instead of something that actually happened. But I still think about it whenever someone excuses themselves one too many times or seems too eager to disappear when things get uncomfortable. Some dates fall apart quietly. This one collapsed in a hallway, clogged every exit it touched, and tried to sneak out the back. I didn't realize how many people were watching me until I felt like the room had filled up without making a sound. It started as that itchy feeling you get when someone's staring and you can't see them, like eyes pressing against the back of your head. I kept turning slightly in my chair, expecting to catch someone nearby looking too long. I never considered the eyes weren't in the room at all. We matched the night before. Her profile was bright and chaotic in a way that felt fun. Lots of selfies, weird captions, screenshots of comments from people hyping her up. She seemed confident, loud, comfortable taking up space. Our messages were playful and fast. She suggested meeting at a late-night dessert spot downtown, one of those places that stayed open way past midnight and attracted a mixed crowd. I agreed because it sounded low pressure. When I got there, she was already seated at a corner table, phone propped upright against a sugar holder. I'd assumed she had been watching videos or texting someone. She smiled big when she saw me, waved me over, and tilted the phone slightly without turning it off. I didn't think much of it. Everyone props their phone up now. The place was packed. Neon lights buzzing, music low but constant. People squeezed into small tables laughing too loud. It felt public and safe. She looked exactly like her pictures, high energy, talking fast, laughing at her own jokes. She asked me questions and actually listened, reacting in a way that felt exaggerated but not fake. Every few minutes, though, she glanced at her phone screen. Not down at notifications, but directly at the screen like she was checking something happening in real time. Sometimes she nodded subtly. Sometimes she smiled wider. Once, she leaned closer to the phone and adjusted the angle just a little. I assumed she was recording something, maybe a story, maybe a vlog clip. That still didn't bother me much. Lots of people document everything now. I figured I would end up in the background of a clip somewhere, blurry and forgettable. About 20 minutes in, she reached across the table and adjusted the phone again, angling it so both of us were fully in frame. The screen brightness flickered, and I noticed movement on it that wasn't just reflections. Text scrolling upward. Icons popping in and out. My stomach tightened. I leaned forward slightly and finally focused on the screen. It wasn't a recording. It was a live stream. Comments were flying by too fast to read individually, but I caught fragments. Jokes about first dates. Reactions to my face. Guesses about my personality. Laughing emojis stacked on top of each other. My heart started pounding. I felt heat rush to my face. I asked her what that was, trying to keep my voice calm. She laughed it off, still smiling at the phone, and said she streamed sometimes. Said her followers loved first date content. Said it was harmless because she never shared names. I sat back, stunned. The noise of the place suddenly felt overwhelming. The music too loud. The lights too bright. I realized my posture had stiffened, my hands clenched together on the table. I told her I wasn't comfortable with that she hadn't asked, that I didn't agree to be content. My words felt small compared to the flood of text still rolling across the screen. She frowned briefly, then shrugged, saying people were already watching and it wasn't a big deal. She tilted the phone again to capture my reaction, eyes flicking between me and the screen. That's when the donations started. Small alerts popped up on the screen, bright and animated. Usernames followed by amounts in numbers and dollars spelled out in text. Comments attached to them, urging her to keep the date going, to not let me leave yet, to push it further. My chest tightened. I stood up instinctively, chair scraping loudly against the floor. People nearby glanced over, annoyed more than concerned. I grabbed my jacket, heart racing, and told her I was leaving. The phone chimed again. Another donation, then another. The comments sped up, the tone shifting. People begging her to keep me there, daring her to do it, throwing money at the moment like it was a game. Her eyes lit up in a way that made my stomach drop. She glanced at the screen, then back at me, then at the screen again. She asked me to sit back down, said it would only be a few more minutes. She said her viewers were loving the tension. I felt sick. I took a step back from the table, bumping into another chair. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was in my throat. I suddenly became aware of how visible I was. How many people in the room could see us? How many more could see me through that phone? She turned the phone slightly to follow me as I moved, narrating the moment for her audience without looking away from the screen. She laughed nervously, like she was trying to keep the energy up. The alerts kept coming. More money, more comments, some playful, some aggressive. All of them focused on one thing, keeping me there. I looked around, wondering if anyone else noticed what was happening. Everyone looked wrapped up in their own nights, their own conversations. From the outside, it probably looked like a normal, awkward date moment. Nothing worth intervening in. I realized then how alone I was in that space, despite being watched by hundreds of people. I told her again that I was leaving. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just stated it and stepped toward the aisle. She followed with the phone, still filming, still smiling, still reacting to the comments. She said something to the effect of calming everyone down, reassuring them it was fine, but her tone betrayed excitement more than concern. She kept glancing at the donation total, which continued to climb. As I walked toward the exit, I felt a surge of panic I hadn't expected. Not fear that she would physically stop me, but fear of how much control she seemed to think she had, how the attention had shifted her priorities in real time. Near the door, I turned back and told her firmly to stop filming me, to end it, to put the phone down. My voice shook despite my effort. For a moment she hesitated. The phone wavered in her hand. The comments kept flying. More money. More pressure. Then she laughed again, louder this time, and said it was just content. That was it. I pushed through the door and stepped into the street, the cold air hitting me like a shock. My hands were shaking. My heart raced. Behind me, the door swung closed and muffled the sound of the place, but I could still picture the phone pointed at where I had been standing. I walked fast, not looking back, weaving for people on the sidewalk until the lights of the dessert spot faded behind me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Once, twice, I didn't check it. When I finally stopped, leaning against a wall a block away, I realized how exposed I felt. Like pieces of me had been handed out to strangers without my permission. My face, my reactions, my discomfort, all lit archived somewhere I couldn't reach. Later that night, curiosity got the better of me. I opened the app she streamed on and searched her username. The video was still there, replayable. A thumbnail of me mid-movement, eyes wide, caught between standing and leaving. Comments underneath dissecting every second. I reported it immediately. I don't know if it came down because of that or because she ended it herself later. I didn't wait to find out. She messaged me afterward, apologizing in a casual way, saying she didn't think it would be a big deal, saying her audience sometimes got carried away. She said the money helped her pay rent. She said she hoped I wasn't mad. I didn't respond. I blocked her on everything and turned my phone off for the night. Even days later, I kept thinking about how quickly the situation turned. How easily a private moment became a performance. How strangers with usernames and wallets felt entitled to decide whether I could leave a table. What unsettled me most wasn't the stream itself. It was the way her expression changed when the donations started. How the audience mattered more than the person sitting in front of her. How money and attention rewired the moment instantly. I still go on dates. I still meet people from apps. But every time someone props their phone up on the table now, my chest tightens. I find myself scanning screens, looking for scrolling text, listening for alert sounds that don't belong in real life. Some nights stick with you because they were exciting or fun. This one stuck because I realized how thin the line is between being on a date and being content for someone else's entertainment. The 10 minutes after I unmatched him felt like borrowed time, the kind you don't realize is fragile until it's already gone. I remember standing in my kitchen with my shoes still on, jacket half off, phone in my hand, thinking the night was finally done. Not dramatic, not traumatic, just another date that didn't click. I was already moving on in my head, already rewriting the story into something forgettable. Then my phone rang. We matched that afternoon. His profile looked soft around the edges, the kind of smile that tried to signal kindness without trying too hard. He talked about routines, about wanting something stable, about being tired of games. That always gets me. The tired of games line feels like a promise, even when it isn't. Our messages were steady and polite, nothing intense, nothing flirty enough to raise alarms. He suggested meeting at a casual spot near a park, somewhere public and easy. I agreed without thinking twice. The date itself was fine in the most unremarkable way possible. We sat outside, traffic humming in the background, people walking dogs, kids on scooters. He talked about work and how he was trying to be better at communication. He said he hated lying. That detail stuck with me later. At the time, it just felt like filler. He checked his phone a few times, always face down, always quickly. I didn't care. Everyone checks their phone. He laughed at my jokes, asked questions, seemed present enough. Nothing sparked, but nothing crashed either. When the check came, we split it and stood up awkwardly, both knowing there wouldn't be a second date, but neither wanting to say it out loud. We hugged briefly and went our separate ways. No tension, no drama, just done. I walked home, unlocked my door, kicked my shoes off, and opened the app out of habit. His profile was still there, smiling like it hadn't just sat across from me. I had unmatched him without ceremony. No message, no explanation. I didn't owe one and didn't feel like giving one. I set my phone down and went to pour a glass of water. That's when it rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. I usually do. Something made me answer it anyway, maybe the timing, maybe instinct, maybe just bad luck. The voice on the other end introduced themselves as police. My stomach dropped so fast it felt physical. My brain scrambled, flipping through memories, trying to find something I had done wrong. Parking tickets, noise complaints. Nothing added up. They asked if I had recently met someone through Tinder. They said his name. I said yes. They asked if I still had our chat. I glanced at my phone on the counter, screen dark, app closed. I told them I had just unmatched him minutes ago, but that the messages should still exist on the platform. They told me that was good. The words didn't land right. They explained slowly, carefully, like they were walking someone through a shock. My Tinder chat with him was now evidence. They said they needed to ask a few questions and might need screenshots if I had any. They said my name had come up because his partner had found the messages. Partner. They said she was pregnant. The room felt like it tilted. I sat down hard on a kitchen chair, my legs suddenly weak. The officer continued explaining, voice steady, saying the situation had escalated quickly. His partner had confronted him earlier that night. There had been shouting. Neighbors had called it in. When police arrived, he admitted to meeting someone earlier that day. Me. He had tried to minimize it at first, said it was nothing, said it was just talking. Then the messages came out. The plans, the meetup, the timestamps lining up with when he was supposed to be elsewhere. The officer told me my chat helped establish a timeline. I stared at the wall and my heart beat loud in my ears. I kept thinking about the way he said he hated lying, about the calm way he talked about wanting stability, about how easily those words slid out of his mouth. They asked if he had mentioned a partner. I said no. They asked if he had talked about a child. I said no. They asked if anything on the date felt off or secretive. I told them about the phone checks, how he kept it face down, how he seemed distracted at times. The officer thanked me, said I hadn't done anything wrong, said I was not in trouble, said they just needed clarity. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence that followed. The kitchen felt too quiet. The hum of the fridge sounded louder than usual. I opened the app again, half expecting his profile to be gone. It was. It had deleted or removed. The chat thread was inaccessible now, replaced by a blank space where his name used to be. It felt eerie, like a digital crime scene cleaned too quickly. I replayed the date in my head, searching for cracks. The things I had brushed off. The way he avoided specifics about his live situation. The way he framed himself as tired and honest. It all looked different now, like a photo viewed after you know what's hiding outside the frame. My phone buzzed again later that night. Same number. The officer asked if I remembered the exact time we met and when we parted ways. I checked my location history. Gave them what I could. They thanked me again and said that was likely all they needed. When I hung up the second time, I finally felt it hit. Not fear, not guilt, but a heavy sadness I couldn't shake. Somewhere not far away, someone was sitting with the weight of a betrayal magnified by a pregnancy, by plans that suddenly felt fragile, and I had been unknowingly slotted into that story for an hour. I went to bed late, tossing and turning, my mind replaying his face, his laugh, the way he talked about honesty like it was a value instead of a performance. Every time I drifted off, my phone buzzed in my dreams. The next day, I felt off, hyper-aware of my phone, jumpy at notifications. I kept thinking about the 10-minute window between unmatching him and the call. How close I had come to deleting everything entirely. How strange it felt to be part of something serious without choosing to be. Later that week, another officer followed up briefly, just to confirm a detail. They said the situation had been resolved enough for their purposes. They thanked me again for cooperating. They told me I could block the number and move on. I did. But moving on wasn't instant. Every time I matched with someone new, I found myself scanning profiles harder, looking for inconsistencies, listening for words that felt rehearsed. Tired of games stopped sounding comforting and started sounding like a cover. What stuck with me wasn't the police call itself. It was how ordinary the date had felt. How easily someone could step out of a life with real consequences and sit across from a stranger like nothing was at stake. How the app made that jump feel seamless. I still think about the timing sometimes. The unmatch. The call. The idea that erasing someone digitally doesn't erase the ripple they leave behind. For a few minutes, I had thought I was done, free to forget. Instead, I became a footnote in someone else's worst night. I deleted the app for a while after that. Not forever. just long enough to breathe without wondering who else's story I might accidentally walk into next.